Welcome to the Agoura Hills Planning Commission meeting of August 6th. Please silence all cell phones and electronic devices during the live meeting. To prevent interference with the audiovisual system, do not join the Zoom webinar from within the council chambers. Members of the public may comment on any item on the agenda either in person in the council chambers or remotely via Zoom, which is audio only. All speakers addressing the Planning Commission are to refrain from disorderly conduct that disrupts or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting. I will now defer to the City Clerk.
Thank you, Chair Reinhardt. Any person in the council chambers who wishes to speak or submit a written comment is requested to complete a public comment card for each item and submit to the clerk prior to the public comment portion of the item. Comments submitted at the meeting will be provided to the Planning Commission for review and filed with the official record. For any person participating remotely, written public comments were requested to be emailed by 4 p.m. today and distributed to the Planning Commission in advance of the meeting. To request to speak remotely, please use the raise hand function in Zoom. When recognized by the City Clerk, press the unmute button and provide comments. Individuals joining by telephone may dial the number listed on the agenda and enter the webinar ID. To request to speak, press star 9, and when called upon by the City Clerk, press star 6 to unmute and provide comments. Participants wishing to comment on additional agenda items must remain in or rejoin the Zoom webinar as needed. Request to speak must be received prior to the chair closing the public comment portion of the item. Public testimony for all speakers is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. Written public comments will not be read aloud by the clerk. For full details, please refer to the public participation section on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. I will now call the meeting to order and defer to Commissioner Stein for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I will now defer to the City Clerk for a roll call vote. Attendance.
You are fine. Thank you.
We're voting on attendance, right?
Commissioner Platzer?
Here.
Commissioner Roth?
Here.
Commissioner Stein?
Present.
Vice Chair Sharon?
Here.
Chair Reinhardt?
Here.
Chair Reinhardt, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Seeing as there are no excused absences, we will move on to the approval of the agenda. Will the makers of the motion and the second to approve the agenda please state your names?
Commissioner Steins makes a motion to approve the agenda.
Commissioner Sharon, Vice Chair Sharon seconds.
Thank you. I will now defer to the City Clerk for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Platzer?
Aye.
Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Stein?
Aye.
Vice Chair Sharon?
Aye.
Chair Reinhardt?
Aye.
Chair Reinhardt, you have approval 5-0.
Perfect, thank you. I will now move on to the public comment section. This section is reserved for individuals wishing to speak on items not listed on the agenda that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. If you have materials to distribute to the Commission, please do not approach the dais. Instead, provide them to the City Clerk for distribution on your behalf. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. Written comments submitted by individuals may not be read aloud by another speaker. Individuals addressing the Commission shall refrain from disorderly conduct that disrupts or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting. I will now defer to the City Clerk for public comments.
Thank you, Chair Reinhardt. We did not receive any written correspondence, nor do we have any speaker cards, and there are no remote participants.
Perfect, thank you. I will now move on to the consent calendar. This section is reserved for persons wishing to speak on items on the consent calendar. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker, not 3 minutes per item. I will now defer to the City Clerk for public comments.
Thank you. We did not receive any written correspondence. We do not have any speaker cards, and there are no remote participants.
Perfect, thank you. Are there any questions from the Commission on the consent calendar? Hearing and seeing none, I will now call for a motion and a second to adopt the consent calendar.
Commissioner Roth moves to adopt tonight's consent calendar.
Commissioner Stein seconds.
Thank you. I will defer to the City Clerk for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Platzer?
Aye.
Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Stein?
Aye.
Vice Chair Sharon?
Aye.
Chair Reinhardt?
Aye.
Chair Reinhardt, you have approval 5-0.
Great, thank you. Moving on to public hearing item number 3. Our next item is to conduct a public hearing to consider a resolution recommending that the City Council adopt a zoning ordinance amendment, or ZOA, and specific plan amendment, SPA. I will now open the public hearing and defer to Associate Planner Katrina Garcia.
Thank you, Chair Reinhardt, and good evening, Planning Commissioners. Tonight's item is a zoning ordinance amendment and a specific plan amendment. So tonight I'll give a quick background on why the zoning amendments and specific plan amendments came about. Then I'll do a deep dive into some of the substantive changes to the ordinance related to the commercial use table, alcohol establishments, and parking regulations. Then I'll talk about some of the minor changes to the ABSP, and then a quick CEQA summary, and then we'll finish off with staff's recommendation. So the zoning ordinance amendments and the ABSP amendments were triggered by a series of events beginning in 2024 when the city hired a consultant to conduct a retail market assessment. The assessment was presented to the full city council, who then instructed the city's economic development team to complete additional outreach to the business community, property owners, and real estate representatives. The results of the outreach was presented to the Land Use and Economic Development Committee, also known as the LUEDC, which is composed of 2 city council members, on June 10th, 2025. One prevailing challenge that was identified during the outreach was the permitting process. In response to that, the Community Development Department identified 3 major barriers that applicants and businesses face when trying to operate. This included an outdated commercial use table, a lengthy and costly alcohol CUP process, and restrictive parking requirements. These 3 barriers were presented to the LUDC on July 28, 2025, and subsequently to the full City Council during a regular meeting. Staff then proceeded to amend parts of the code to address these barriers, and then presented the draft code amendments to the LUEDC on April 29, 2026, where staff received positive feedback. Since that meeting, staff has continued to refine the amendments to ensure internal consistency and to ensure it achieves the City Council's goals as it relates to economic development. So we'll start off with the commercial use table and the director's authority. Before a new business operates or locates itself in the city, they contact staff to find out whether their use is permitted. A typical exchange between staff and the applicant include address and zone verification, with follow-up questions to the specific use that gives staff a better understanding of how it should be classified, and verification of the use on the commercial use table to determine whether the use is allowed in the zone. These situations could go one of 4 ways. 1, the use is not listed, which means it's prohibited in the city, and the applicant moves on to another city. 2, if it's not listed, then the applicant can opt for Planning Commission to provide an interpretation, where they would have to pay fees with no guaranteed positive outcome and wait for the next regular meeting. 3, if it's not listed, then they would be able to apply for a zoning ordinance amendment, which can also be costly and time-consuming with no guaranteed outcome. And 4, the use is listed and permitted in the zone, which means they can operate in the location they've identified. However, this would just be step 1 in staff's analysis of the use. And then we'll go back to this scenario later in the presentation. So to address the hurdles that created the first 3 scenarios, staff proposes to give the Community Development Director additional authority to determine whether an unlisted use would be allowed in the location being proposed. This doesn't necessarily mean that the director would be able to approve any use, but the amendments would set thresholds or findings that the director would need to make before allowing the use. So some of those findings would be the assessment of whether the unlisted use's function and impact can be equated to a use that is already permitted by the code. This analysis could include customer traffic patterns and parking demands. 2, the director would also assess whether the use is consistent with the zoning district and general plan to make sure the use doesn't negatively impact the long-term vision for the zone. 3, the director would also need to ensure the use doesn't create adverse impacts greater than those associated with similar permitted uses. And lastly, ensure the use isn't hazardous to the public. If the director is unable to make these findings, then the use would be denied, which could then be appealed to the Planning Commission by the applicant. In addition to the following, to allowing the director to make the determinations on unlisted uses, staff also proposes to add a new use to the commercial use table for experiential retail to address the evolving retail landscape that can be driven by social media trends and technology. Experiential retail focuses on immersive customer engagement rather than passive product browsing, which could range from escape rooms to semi-permanent art installations and product workshops. Given its broad application range, staff proposes to restrict it to an enclosed building, and any outdoor use would still require a conditional use permit. To ensure the use doesn't impact any surrounding tenants or the public, all queuing would be strictly regulated. So moving on to alcohol establishments. Under the current code, a conditional use permit is required for all on and off sale establishments, which includes family restaurants that serve beer and wine, and all the way up to bars and nightclubs and liquor stores, which sell and serve hard liquor. All alcohol establishments require a license or multiple licenses from the California Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control, also known as ABC. ABC has their own methodology in approving licenses. However, before a license is approved by ABC, they always verify with the city as to whether it requires a conditional use permit or any type of city approval. A conditional use permit for any alcohol establishment can be costly for family restaurants and smaller eating establishments where alcohol sales do help with their revenue. These types of establishments typically operate under a Type 41, which is beer and wine only, or a Type 47, which includes distilled spirits and usually served at a restaurant bar. The difference between these two licenses and other on-sale licenses is that this establishment must be a bona fide public eating place, which means food service must be their primary revenue source and includes a full kitchen to serve those meals. Another distinguishing difference between these two licenses and other on-sale licenses is that minors are not restricted from entering the restaurant or the establishment. Establishments that operate with a Type 41 or 47 are generally innocuous uses that are not disruptive to the surrounding areas. Because of this, staff proposes to ministerially review these establishments and allow them without a conditional use permit in all zones that allow the primary use, which includes restaurants. This means that there would be no public hearing and the use would be verified by staff either through business licensing or tenant improvements. So even though this use would receive ministerial approval, they will still have to meet a strict set of operational standards. First, they must operate as a bona fide public eating place defined under the California Business and Professions Code. And they are restricted exclusively to a Type 41 or a Type 47 license, meaning no other license types are allowed. Alcohol service will be limited to specific hours from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., which aligns with typical operating hours in the city. They must also comply with all ABC regulations, including mandatory training for all staff who serve alcohol. And just like any other restaurant or eating establishment in the city, age-restricted entries are strictly prohibited. If a proposal exceeds any of these thresholds, it will be subject to a conditional use permit. Otherwise, if a violation occurs, the director has the ability to revoke the approval. Parking regulations. So if you go back to the scenario earlier in the presentation, I described that verification of the proposed use is just step one. The next step to that would be to verify whether the location of the proposed use has adequate parking. Parking is based on a ratio provided in the code where an X amount of parking is required for an X amount of floor area. So for example, a business office requires 1 space for every 300 square feet of gross floor area. If the tenant space is 2,000 square feet, then the required parking is 6.67, which rounds up to 7 spaces. In some instances, the existing commercial site or shopping center can easily accommodate the use. based on the other existing uses and the parking capacity, which is the actual number of parking spaces that exist in the parking lot. If the site does not have the capacity and does not meet the code's required number of parking spaces, some businesses choose alternative sites in the city or leave the city altogether. The purpose of these next amendments is to retain businesses and make it easier for the public and for staff to apply the code. The code currently offers parking reduction options that can be overwhelming and convoluted and are not as effective for tenants going into existing shopping centers that are legally non-conforming and don't have the capacity to accommodate additional parking. These next slides will cover a couple of the parking reduction strategies that tenants and property owners may use to minimize vacancies. Approval of the reductions would be subject to the director and may be appealed to the Planning Commission. So one of the more commonly used strategies that staff could potentially offer to applicants would be a simple change of use. And the purpose of this reduction strategy is to get businesses in the door as quickly and as cost effectively as possible. This means that if a business fell under any of these 4 use tiers and they're located in a shopping center that had unknown parking capacity, they would still be able to occupy the space. Staff would only need to look at whether the use is allowed by right, it's in the same leasehold as the previous tenant, it doesn't exceed 5,000 square feet, and no additional floor area is proposed. These objective standards are quickly accessible to the business owner and staff and doesn't require extensive research. Here's an example of how that could play out on paper. So let's say there's an existing Tier 4 use, an office, that's in a space that is 2,500 square feet. The required parking ratio is low at 1 per 300, which means they originally had 8 spaces allocated to them. Now that the space is vacant, a small art gallery, which is a Tier 2 use, is looking to occupy the 2,500 square foot tenant space. An art gallery would require 1 space per 225 square feet of floor area, which means they're now required to provide 11 spaces. Technically, the art gallery use would be short 3 parking spaces and as currently written in the code, and unless proven otherwise, typically through extensive internal research, the business would not be able to occupy the space. So staff would have to deny the application or have them work with the property owner to help accommodate their parking needs. This amendment would essentially change that dynamic and create an opportunity for a small art gallery to occupy the space despite the minor parking deficiency. Since tenants of shopping centers and commercial developments are constantly changing, this amendment will save staff time and boost business occupancy of vacant tenant spaces. So whether the tenant space is going from a low intensity parking requirement of 1 per 300 to a higher intensity parking requirement of 1 per 200, the 5,000 square foot threshold would hold the line at a maximum deficiency of 8 parking spaces. Another reduction strategy worth highlighting is the parking lot beautification incentive. This would promote tree planting on parking lots that lack tree canopies. This particular strategy would require property owner initiation as opposed to the simple change of use strategy, which requires minimal property coordination. The incentive would allow a 5% reduction of the overall required parking if the property owner accommodates and plants trees that will cover at least 10% of the parking lot floor area at maturity. So, for example, a shopping center has 100,000 square feet of parking lot floor area. The cumulative required parking based on the existing land use composition is 300 parking spaces. They are allowed to reduce the parking by no more than 5%, which is 15 spaces. To maximize this benefit, they would need to plant trees that would ultimately create a canopy coverage of at least 10,000 square feet at maturity, or typically about 15 years. Plans for a proposal like this would require licensed landscape architects and arborists to weigh in on tree species and planting locations. Other parking reductions include modifications. So this provision already exists in the code and allows a 10% decrease in the required parking if certain findings can be met. 2, preferred carpool and vanpool. This also exists in the code with some modification to the language for clarity. And what this does is it allows commercial developments to reduce up to 2% of the required parking if certain parking spaces were converted to a carpool or vanpool, and they provide relief by making them covered or shaded or located close to a building. So each space converted to carpool can be reduced by 1 parking space as long as it doesn't exceed 2% of the required parking. This would mainly benefit larger developments with a large parking requirement. 3, staggered peak demands. This provision also exists in the code, but the amended language is proposed for additional clarity. This would apply to developments that are composed of land uses that don't typically have the same operating hours. A parking study by a licensed professional would need to be created that analyzes the site, the uses, and typical hours of operation and peak hours of operation. The city has already used this methodology in the past, specifically with the Wizen Market, where it was demonstrated that the parking demand didn't exceed the required parking or the on-site capacity. This provision accounts for mixed-use developments and typical habits that have been quantified through a standard parking and trip generation manual by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, or ITE for short. 4, smart parking systems. So as technology evolves, staff wanted to capture options that property owners could establish on site to ease congestion and traffic within parking lots. Typically, smart systems would provide real-time data to patrons looking for parking through light indicators or digital parking counters. They wouldn't necessarily be restricted to these specific types because technology could change and more options may be created in the future. 5, shared parking. The code already has a shared parking table that sets subjective thresholds based on land use composition, but the shared parking method was restricted to larger developments that had more than 25,000 square feet. The proposed amendment removes the building size threshold, which would allow all developments of any size to utilize the shared parking table, provided they have a mixed land use composition. Overall, the purpose of the parking reduction is to reduce vacancies within commercial sites and shopping centers. Except for the simple change of use reduction, all strategies require director approval, which means a director can deny a reduction request if there isn't sufficient parking or results in unsafe conditions such as overflow of vehicles into public streets. In these cases, the applicant will be able to appeal the request to the Planning Commission. So the Agoura Village specific plan changes. Currently, the Agoura Village specific plan requires that all projects that need a building permit also needs an Agoura Village development permit or an AVDP. This means that some exterior improvements, such as window or door changeouts, new exterior material finishes, or small patio covers, would have to submit an AVDP and pay up to $12,000 for a deposit. This requirement could be cumbersome to smaller businesses due to limited budgets and time. To alleviate that, staff is proposing a threshold for certain projects that fall under 10% of the existing floor area. For example, if a tenant wants to add a small patio area and it's less than 10% of the existing building, then the project can be reviewed by the director through an administrative site plan review. This threshold would also apply to non-conforming uses or buildings, but the caveat is that they still need to comply with the development standards of the ABSP. Staff also proposes to align on-sale alcohol establishments within the ABSP with the new provisions in the zoning ordinance that allows staff to ministerially approve establishments that operate with a type 41 or 47 and comply with the provisions of that specific section. One thing that I'd like to add is additional clarifying language to the ABSP amendment in Chapter 7 under G, non-conforming uses. Since staff is proposing to remove the project threshold for non-conforming buildings and uses, we'd like to add language that is more explicit and directly refers back to the new exempt projects threshold. So the additional language would continue and are subject to an Agoura Village-specific development permit unless exempt pursuant to Section E exempt projects of Chapter 7 administration. The proposed amendments are exempt from CEQA under the common sense exemption because the amendments don't directly authorize physical expansions to any buildings or increase intensity that result in additional traffic, but rather sets operational standards and objective criteria for certain uses and creates a more streamlined process for businesses looking to occupy vacant spaces. These amendments would have no significant effect on the environment. So that staff recommends the Planning Commission adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council, 1, approve a zoning ordinance amendment to Article 9 of the Agoura Hills Municipal Code, including the commercial use table, special conditions, off-street parking regulations, Part 13 of Chapter 3 to renumber the alcoholic beverage sales section, and add new ministerial approval standards for certain alcoholic beverage establishments, create new experiential retail standards, and other textual changes for consistency. 2, approve a specific plan amendment to the Agoura Village specific plan to establish a streamlined review and administrative approval process for eligible project types and align on-sale alcohol beverage establishment use provisions with the municipal code. And 3, make a determination of exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act. And that concludes my presentation. I am available for any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Katrina, for your very thorough report for us. With that said, I know that we just heard a lot and took in a lot, and that we all did a lot of pre-reading, before the meeting, I hope. So wanted to float something by everybody, and Travis, you can tell me if we need a vote on this or a consensus, but in order to organize each of the discussions in the most efficient way possible so that everyone can be heard and that there's clarity, I wanted to maybe go around and break out each of these 4 sections and discuss them separately. So everyone would have a turn with each section that was identified in Katrina's report and be able to ask questions of staff before we moved on to the public comment section. So I know that the normal parlance is to talk about everything and have each commissioner go through all of their questions all at once. But I think for organization standpoint, it would make a lot more sense, and everyone would be heard better if we did that. So are there any objections, and do we need to vote on that?
No vote necessary, as long as everyone is able to ask the questions that they have.
Okay. Are we all in agreement on that? Okay, great. So with that, let's start with section 1. And Katrina, if you could humor me and maybe bring up each section as we ask you questions, that might be helpful. So the first section dives into the unlisted functions and the uses that have not been permitted or needed Planning Commission interpretation. So with that, I will start with Commissioner Stein with your questions on that.
Gee, thank you. And I had everything all in lumped together, so now I got to go through all my questions.
I just like to keep you on your toes,
yes.
and I'm keeping organized.
The bottom line is my questions are intended to ensure that this new streamlined process remains objective, transparent, enforceable, and protective of neighboring businesses and residents. So part of my first question is, will the director level discretion be sufficiently limited by written findings and consistent procedures? Yes or no?
Yes, they would be written on a document that would be given to the applicant requesting for the use.
So again, with all this director level determinations, they're going to be documented in writing, and they're going to be maintained in a publicly accessible log?
Yes, so we have a permitting portal that can be accessed by the public. Some of the information may be limited in view, but we would be able to pull up any permits that are associated with the address.
Okay. So if the director approves a particular applicant and location, will that establish a precedent for similar uses across the city?
Correct.
Okay. Who receives the notice of the director level approval, and who would have a standing to appeal it?
So the only person that would be notified of the determination would be the applicant requesting for the use change or the allowance of the use. This provision won't publicly notice the director's determination.
So this whole process is to try to speed things up. But during this process, if the director decides this is actually becoming more complicated, they could put a stop to it and say, no, this is got to go to the Planning Commission.
That's correct.
Okay, I'm going to defer my other questions to the other.
Okay, great, thank you. Commissioner Platzer?
I just want some clarification. What is an escape room?
It is a room that is themed with puzzles that you have to solve, and you have to try and get out within a specified time.
It's like a living video game. So it's typically used for like team building. So you enter a room, and in order to escape the room, you have to solve a puzzle in a certain amount of time in order to get to using clues that are in the room.
I thought it was for, in case it was a criminal action and you had escape room. So I just asked, it's a stupid question, but okay. Also, I see at the last paragraph that the supermarkets and grocery stores are only allowed along the freeway corridor, and this will permit it to be outside the freeway corridor, correct?
Yes, so right now the supermarkets are restricted to certain zones in the city. Mainly they're focused within the CSMU, which is along Canaan and Thousand Oaks Boulevard. By allowing the supermarket use in the CRS, that opens up more supermarkets along Agoura Road and the freeway corridor.
So these supermarkets will be just as big, 10,000 square feet?
It depends on whatever the space is that's available to them.
Okay, all right. I will defer my questions.
Thank you.
Actually, I have a follow-on question. In that example, and my question was going to be, this will be asked also for this use case, but also in the alcohol section. But what would then come to the Planning Commission? So in the example that Commissioner Platzer just laid out, is that something that would come to the Planning Commission, or is that a ministerial decision, say, for a supermarket at 10,000 square feet?
So if there's no building yet, that would come to the Planning Commission.
Got it.
But I believe the supermarket would be a by right use, so if there's an existing structure, they would technically be allowed by right.
As long as it meets other considerations?
Yeah,
Like we're
yes.
considering
So
alcohol and
If
parking?
there is alcohol being sold at the markets, then it would need a conditional use permit because it would be more than a type 41 or 47 license.
Okay, and I'll ask that in the second, I think our second section. That's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Vice Chair Sharon?
Thank you for the presentation. Is it, so to grant the director the authority for, to make similar use interpretations, is that a typical act of other municipalities when it comes to the director's role?
I believe so, and maybe Robbie can chime in on this.
Yeah, yes, there's several jurisdictions that allow alcohol uses by right, and a lot of jurisdictions do things differently. Some do things, all alcohol licenses are actually approved by the director. Other jurisdictions require all CUPs, some do a mix, so it's a steady balance, I would say.
Okay. All right. And then if a business permit was, are we on business permits right now? Or just the?
This has to do with authority for unlisted uses.
Okay,
of
so
permits.
I think this is the right section. So if something is denied by the director and it goes to appeal in front of the planning commission and it proceeds and gets approval, is the city at risk for any of the incurred costs that the applicant had? Like sometimes when things are overturned, costs are too. So I just want to make sure we're not creating a cost situation for the city.
No, so if the applicant were to appeal the director's denial, they would be responsible for paying all fees associated with the appeal.
Okay, all right. And if it's appealed by the planning commission, does that mean it has to get appealed by the city council as well, or is it final stop here?
Correct. So it could be appealed to the city council.
Okay. And what kind of process is that, like time-wise and cost-wise?
So if the applicant appealed the planning commission's decision, then they would have to pay additional fees to appeal it to the city council.
Okay. And if they wanted to just appeal it to the planning commission, would it be just the first available meeting, or is there a time frame requirement?
Usually it would be the first available meeting, but depending on how much work needs to be done in writing a report, or if the applicant needs a little time, then we would accommodate for that.
Okay. That is all for the section for me.
Great, thank you. I don't have too many questions. I want to compliment all of my fellow commissioners on their questions so far, because some of them answered a couple of things that had popped up in my mind, and I can tell everybody did their homework on this one, so great job. With that said, I know that, in discussion when we were, when you were briefed, or you briefed me on this issue, I had a question about what that appeal process was like, and you did streamline that, but that the ultimate goal was city council heard the concerns from business owners within the community and with the occupancy rates of certain existing properties, and looked for ways to streamline the process so that it was easier to fill those occupancies with things that were reasonable and prudent, right? So if with that, right, that there are these stopgap measures, both at the discretion of the director, and additionally, if there's something that comes up that would be flagged, that there would be recourse with, the planning commission to then go ahead and review it, and that would be, so that would be the process. It would go back to sort of the default process that existed prior, other than some of the other, parameters that were streamlined, like, for example, the alcohol use permit. Is that correct? For this section, I view this section as kind of the overall arching theme of being able to give the director more ministerial discretion.
That's correct.
Okay.
With the ability for the applicant to appeal decision if it were to get denied.
Right, but that with a lot of these particular issues that were flagged by both business owners and city council as being cost prohibitive or inhibiting reasonable business use within the city, that these steps, based on research and comparable city procedures in cities of similar size, that this would be a norm.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. I will reserve my additional questions for the next section. I know we switched it up, but I think this actually might be a good way to go for something. We're coming back to you right now. It's your turn. Or did you have an additional comment before we move on from section 1?
Yes, I just wanted to make sure someone comes forward with an unlisted use and it goes to the director. What happens if it's greater intensity? I mean, that's a determination that you'll decide if that should become now a listed use throughout the city? I mean, I'm assuming that, you know,
If it's greater intensity, then I wouldn't be able to make the findings, so it would just be denied.
okay, thank you. And again, I think you answered, but will each determination be location-specific, especially when surrounding uses are very different?
So if you take a look at the findings on the screen, those are the exact findings that the planning director would need to make in order to allow the similar use. They would need to make the finding that it's similar in function and impact to a list that's already allowed. It would need to be consistent with the zoning district and general plan and any general standards that apply to the use in the zoning ordinance, such as the noise ordinance. There'd have to be no greater adverse impacts, and it couldn't be detrimental to adjacent uses or the public.
Thank you. Okay, so now where are we? Which topic are we?
Okay.
I apologize. I have one follow-up, very
Sure.
specific use case. And Commissioner Stein, thanks for bringing up unlisted use. I was thinking about this. I know our city doesn't allow like marijuana retail. So considering that would be an unlisted use right now, and someone might be motivated to run down the appeals process there, I'd just be curious to know, like in that specific instance, what the legality would look like in regard to our neighboring municipalities have that as a use case, and if that would be something that we could protect if the city does deem that it continues to not want it to be something sold here.
I don't think a director would ever deem that a marijuana use is similar to anything that's currently allowed in the city. And we actually did do I believe it was 2 years ago, we actually explored the option of commercial cannabis sales in the city. We did a whole survey, and by and large, it was about a 50-50 with some people really wanting it and half the people really not wanting it. So with that much of a discrepancy, the city council just decided not to move forward at that point in time. So we do not allow commercial cannabis at all. And that isn't a determination that the director would be able to make.
Of course. And my question, though, more specifically, it's funny to use marijuana and motivation in the same sentence, but if someone were to appeal your discretion on that, because there are similar cities and municipalities near us do allow that sale, and they go through the planning commission, they appeal it again to the city council, like, at what point does the buck stop on that one issue? I know it's very specific, but I know there's been interest in the past, and I know we've done the pulse study, so I'm just very curious to know.
Yeah, the city council would be the final decision maker. So if they appealed it to the planning commission denied it, and then they appealed it again and went to the city council, that's where it would stop.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any additional questions on this section? And when we're done going through all four, we can do an all-encompassing if there's something that comes up, or if something, is triggered by additional conversation, so. Good, okay. So the next section is the alcohol permit reform. So if we could pull that section up. Okay, so with that, I will start with Commissioner Stein for your questions.
Okay, so my understanding, somebody wants to come and open up a restaurant and then want to sell beer and wine or alcohol. They go to ABC. ABC normally goes to the city. I'm just trying to make sure I understand this. And they would ask, does it need a conditional use permit? If it does, then it goes through, do they then stay it? So I'm just trying to get an idea, how much quicker are we going through the process by doing it ministerially versus going through the CUP? And
So before an applicant even considers occupying a space here, usually they have a license, ABC license application already filed with the state. When the state's reviewing that application request, they contact the city just to verify whether there's any specific requirements and approvals that the city would need before ABC approves their license. And usually we tell them they need a conditional use permit, and if that's the case, they don't approve the license until the CUP is approved. In this instance, if it's a 41 or 47 that goes through a ministerial process, it would go through quicker with ABC, specifically the type 41, which is more or less easier to acquire than a 47, which is usually based on lottery.
So if there is a change in ownership or operator, will that trigger a new review? I mean, because obviously we're approving to some extent the restaurant, the user, but because sometimes I understand alcohol licenses can remain with the property.
Yes, so it would stay with the property and the tenant space unless they modify the space that they are operating in, and if they modify the license type. So if they're going from a 41 to a 47, we would need to know about that change.
And I would assume that the objective criteria that would normally be going through the planning commission is going to be upheld by the director, so there's not going to be anything that's going to be less looked at than what the commission would be looking at.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, I'll defer any other questions to my other commissioners.
Thank you. Commissioner Potzer?
So technically, a McDonald's, Pizza Hut, Starbucks can apply for a type 41 and a 47, correct?
Correct, technically.
Okay, but it's harder to get a 47 at a McDonald's, right?
Yes.
All right. And the hours of serving alcohol are between 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Does that mean they serve up to closure? Or is there a regulation to stop, like baseball games, they stop several innings before the people leave?
They had to stop serving at 10 p.m.
So they leave. So
they could either leave, finish up their drinks, maybe the restaurant closes at 11, but they have to stop serving at 10 p.m. Or they close at 10 p.m. and they stop serving at 10 p.m. Or they close at 9 p.m. and they would stop serving before they close.
Okay. All right, I'll defer the questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Roth?
Yeah, thank you. So my question, I guess, is just simply what alcohol license then would be within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission versus a ministerial now?
So you have other on-sale establishments. I don't know the specific license number, but you have grocery store licenses, liquor stores. You have, like the Canyon Club has I believe some kind of nightclub-related alcohol license, and other on-sale establishments. So the only difference with a 41 and a 47 is that they are essentially a bona fide public eating place, which means they have to serve food throughout the operational hours.
Got it. So this, in essence, then streamlines the process for current existing restaurants within the city who may not have these licenses, future ones, but for the most part, the kind of quote-unquote like more riskier or nightclubs, bars, et cetera. We're not going to just turn Canaan into like a bar row or anything like that.
No.
Okay. And then again, the decision being, with regard to the 41, 47, the decisions being appealable to the Planning Commission would only be if the ministerial decision was to deny the application, then that applicant could then appeal the decision to to this body. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Vice Chair Sharon?
Oh, thank you. So I guess what I don't understand is that, like Commissioner Roth was saying, so when we get a liquor license application in front of us, you know, we go through the determination is like, is there already, you know, a number of bars in that, or liquor establishments in that area? Is there, you know, have they been compliant in the past? All these things that we take into consideration, those will all be done with the planning department over the counter, and, or is it just, I filled the form out, I get the license, or I get the
So-
permit?
When it comes to concentration of alcohol establishments, the ABC or ABC department is the one who verifies over concentration. If there is an over concentration, they would reach out to the city and ask for a PCN letter, which is a public convenience or necessity, which the director has the authority to essentially write in support of allowing the use or not allowing the use, if there is a concentration.
Okay, and what if a establishment was like neighboring a neighborhood or a community, and, you know, there was, you know, I know in the past we've had neighbors say, I don't want this establishment having a license, because we already hear them, you know, playing their music or whatever until late hours. Now we're adding alcohol to the rowdiness. You know, where does that conversation come into play? Or are we just now bypassing community input in terms of how it impacts the community?
So the standard operating hours is 7 to 10 p.m., which is also standard of other establishments that go through a CUP process. And so we selected that time frame because that's a typical operating hour, and it's also, it lines up with the city's quiet hours, which is 10 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Okay. And if an establishment wanted to actually stay out later, I mean, I know that you said Canyon Club, so Canyon Club, if they closed at later, would they have to file, well, I guess they don't have one of these licenses, but let's say an establishment wanted to serve alcohol after 10 p.m. Would they be allowed to with a CUP that came before the planning commission?
Yeah, so we would tell them in order for you to operate, you know, beyond 10 p.m., you would have to apply for a CUP. And that goes for all the other objective standards. If they exceed that threshold, then they are subject to a CUP.
Okay. Okay, so they really have to mark all these boxes to avoid the planning commission.
Correct. And if they do violate it, we'll tell them, well, you exceeded the threshold, you have to apply for a CUP or stop doing what you're doing.
Okay. And so essentially, this is like, it streamlines the process for many businesses, because they can start serving alcohol, and then if they determine they want to stay open later or serve later, they can work through that process by not being limited in the current situation they're in. They can still serve up until 10 p.m., but if they want to change any of those or modify any of those parameters, they can do that while still operating their business
Correct.
at full capacity. Okay, I like that. Great. That's it for me in this section.
Great, thank you, Vice Chair Sharon. So for me, I looked at this, and obviously, when you start getting into alcohol permitting, things get very complicated, and we can get into the weeds about the different types of permits and business use cases, and you know that the Canyon Club is obviously a much different use case than what's being proposed here. The example I think of when I think of this would be about a year or two ago was Blue Agave, which is a one-off, quick-serve family restaurant that's in the Agoura Hill City Mall. And they had to go through an arduous process in order to get their permit through here. So that's the reasonable and prudent use case for this particular streamlining. Would that be correct?
Correct.
Okay. And if there were any sort of complaints about what had been approved, there are stopgap measures in order to revoke the license and to make them reapply for something, like, for example, if they started all of a sudden operating as a nightclub without telling anybody, and then there were complaints, there would be specific measures that, and procedures that would take place in order to hinder that, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So with this service too, I mean, Commissioner Platzer brought up, fast food establishments, but generally, is there any sort of control, or would it be under, I guess, ministerial discretion if, like, for example, it was a drive-through restaurant, that it would not be permitted, or because that's been kind of the existing practice, or are there any specific, is there anything specific, like, that would just be at the discretion, or would that be something where they would have to apply for a CUP?
I don't believe ABC would allow that under a 41 or 47 because they would have to consume the alcohol on site. So they wouldn't essentially be able to give the alcohol to somebody in a drive-through and have them drive away.
Okay. I just want to make sure this wasn't Alabama. And to that end, you mentioned earlier that the restricted hours of 7 a.m. To 10 p.m., that if the restaurant was closing, at 9 p.m., that they would obviously cease serving then. But are there any existing, to Commissioner Platzer's point of if the restaurant is closing at 10 p.m., is there a practice in place for them to stop serving an hour before the doors close? Is there any sort of regulation that exists on those permits now with anything related to that, or is it doors shut at 10, that's when they can cut off service?
Yes, so there's no, we didn't institute an hour before closing rule. It's just a hard time of when you are allowed to serve alcohol.
Okay. So Travis, I would call this, there's no seventh inning rule, right? Okay. Just for all my baseball fans out there. Okay, so it's just whatever the hours are that are established, and that's the limit, and it's only specific to these two particular types of permits.
Yes, so even if they stopped serving, if the restaurant closes at 9, they would have to stop serving alcohol at 9 or before 9 because they have to continuously be able to offer full meal service. So if they're fully closed to the public, but they want to serve alcohol, and you're not serving meals, you technically cannot be in operation.
Okay, so when the kitchen closes, the bar closes?
Correct.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. I will reserve any other questions for the end. Okay, I like this process. All right.
Wait,
One more, okay.
on that note, how would you know the kitchen is closed? Because I've been in a restaurant and they say, we don't serve now, and it's 30 minutes before closure. How are we going to monitor that?
If we received a complaint about that, we would usually send somebody out there during that time. So we would have an officer go there and actually go to the restaurant during that time to see if they're still serving alcohol, but the kitchen's closed.
So if they say, we're not serving you food, but you can have some alcohol, that's not allowed.
That's correct. And ABC also investigates those issues as well as the entity that issues the alcohol license. So it wouldn't just be the city also.
Okay, thank you.
And those are regular audits that take place with undercover ABC agents periodically. That's kind of like a health inspector. But
Yeah, I don't know how frequently they do that. I'm sure they don't have that much staff to inspect every alcohol facility in the state, but if they do receive complaints, then they do investigate on those issues, definitely.
As someone who dines late often because of my travel schedule, I actually was just at a restaurant that said we are closing the kitchen and the bar at the same time. So, and that was in Las Vegas of all places. So, okay. All right, great. Moving on to item number 3, parking regulations, something near and dear to my heart, as many know. I'm going to switch it up a little bit, and I'm going to start on this side with Commissioner Roth.
Thank you. Also near and dear to my heart. I'll keep it quick, though. On the canopy parking lot beautification, I think it was up there. Yeah, this is fine. It seems to me that the incentive is very small for the what's required here, right? So canopy needed to qualify as 10,000 square feet. In return, you get 15 spaces. The reduction earned is only 5%, but 15 spaces, what would that roughly be square footage wise?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can probably get a general calculation and get that answer to you before the end of the meeting.
Okay, yeah, because to me, it just seems like, I don't know how my fellow planning commissioners feel about this, and we can obviously, I don't want to err into deliberation, but would it be possible to look at a bigger parking reduction to incentivize more canopy coverage? Because again, to me, when I see 300 spaces and you receive 15 back, but you have to provide 10,000 square feet of canopy, knowing how much it costs in dealing with what we've dealt with in the past with the oak trees, that seems like an incredibly high cost to achieve that for such a limited reward. I don't know if that's really going to do much. So I don't know if you have any further, I don't know, there was no question there, but we can deliberate on that later. But that's my one question about the parking.
Back of the napkin math, I think it'd be about 3,000 square feet of parking spaces that are lost in order to provide the trees. And then since the tree would provide more coverage than the actual spaces themselves that the trees are located in, you would be getting back probably more tree area than space removed, if that makes sense, because the tree has a lot more coverage than the space where it's actually planted. So it's 3,000 to 10,000, but the tree extends over many spaces. But we definitely could look at increasing the incentive if we wanted to do that.
I had a question that was spurned by Commissioner Roth's question/statement. So would the beautification and canopy, is that specifically limited to tree or organic shade cover matter, or would that also include solar shields?
It would only include tree canopies.
Okay, so this, if a property owner wanted to provide solar-powered shade, that would be a completely different process and would probably go through the normal channels.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to jump in, it's just that
That's not a bad incentive, though.
right?
Those are my questions. We can deliberate. I imagine this one will come up in deliberation because, like I said, I hear you, Robbie. I understand that the trunk itself is significantly smaller than the canopy above. Again, the ROI to me, if I were looking at this to me, 15 spaces doesn't seem like such a material change that I would consider that, given that landscaping is a continued cost too on the property. And so, yeah.
And if I could expand on this a little bit, the reason why this is included is because some property owners have expressed interest in doing that and putting trees into their parking lot, but the fact that their parking is already restricted makes them hesitate to do that because they didn't want to further restrict the parking. So by allowing the offset, that's the issue that we're trying to alleviate.
One more follow-up question. I'm so sorry. Sorry on this side of the dais. With that said, the way that you arrived upon the 10% formulation, is that designed to offer a realistic reduction without significantly hindering the actual number of spaces? So there'd be the 10% number. How did you arrive on that being the realistic number for reduction?
So, I mean, really, some of this is back of the napkin math, but it's also some of these parking reductions are cumulative. So you don't want to add too much, especially when it is cumulative. So if it's the Planning Commission's desire to take a look at that and, identify which ones you'd rather incentivize more, then you can certainly look at that. And maybe you'd like the parking lot beautification incentive to be 10% and then the smart parking systems to be 5%. That's something that you could definitely look at and deliberate on and see, or even eliminate some of them, or recommend that. So it's definitely something that you can talk about during deliberation.
Okay, thank you. I will,
Can I ask a question about this, since we're on the topic? Is that okay?
yes, I started with this side, so yes, go ahead.
Did I hear you correctly when you said that the 10,000 square feet of canopy would be at maturity?
Yes.
So, and you said like 20 or 30 years?
About 15 years.
15 years. So hypothetically, how many trees are we talking about now, today, in order to get a 10,000 square foot coverage?
I guess that would depend on the species or the tree.
Okay, fair. And how are we going to be able to regulate that? In 5 years, do we see how much canopy, and then we remove parking spaces because they don't reach the threshold? That, a table that we've created that should, say they're on track to be at 10,000 square feet of canopy by year 15?
Yeah, so there could be some monitoring by staff over a period of certain years, just to make sure that the tree is healthy and stays alive for whatever our arborist or our landscape architect recommends for a certain species.
And is that in the draft?
It's not.
So how would we regulate that or monitor?
We can add that in there
Okay.
as monitoring.
Okay, because that was the first question mark I had when I heard that about, okay, this is a 15-year project, and how are we going to manage the 15-year project? That was my only question for this particularly, but do you want to go?
Yes, I'm going to defer to the other side of the dais. So Commissioner Platzer, I will start with you.
Thank you. All the parking changes or modifications would not affect traffic congestion, especially during evacuation times.
I would say no in terms of evacuation because we're not allowing any intensification of uses. It's really just making sure that uses within existing tenant spaces are able to be fully leased quicker. So I would say it wouldn't really have any impact on the physical footprint of development.
Okay. Also, an applicant can add up all these percentages. So you can have a 10% reduction right off the bat, 2% for carpool, 10% for smart parking, and then 5% for beautification. That's 20% reduction. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So that adds more parking spaces, technically, right?
Reduces.
Reduces. It reduces the parking space.
Yes.
More incentive for the business. That's what I mean. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Stein?
Okay. How was the 5,000 square feet decided that was the amount that not exceed versus 3,000? I'm just want to make sure I get a handle on that.
Are we referring to this particular reduction, the
Yeah,
physical
the
changes?
5,000 square foot threshold.
It's a good solid number, and most of the tenant spaces that turn over range between 2,000 square feet to about 5,000 square feet. With a 5,000 square foot threshold, it would really set the maximum of 8 parking spaces deficient. But that number could be adjusted by the Planning Commission to whatever you think would be comfortable.
So we have a very vacant property right now. A tenant comes and says, I want to use this, then another tenant and another tenant. Is there going to be a maximum amount of parking spaces that can be reduced depending on all the different tenant demands? And does the owner get to have, what's his input on that?
So if the tenants come in and they use this reduction strategy, they would be limited to a certain number. And if each tenant that changes out is 5,000 square feet, the maximum deficiency would be 8 per tenant. And if at some point in time the development does suffer some congestion and some shortages, that would be the property owner's responsibility to essentially alter their parking lot, maybe use some of the incentives and beautify the lot, or implement other strategies that would help other tenants in the center.
Okay, so the director approves a parking reduction. 3 years from now, we find out that it produced chronic shortages of parking. Can that be reversed? Or how does that happen?
If it becomes a health and safety issue, then we would definitely work with the property owner to alleviate that. And then, obviously, once there is a deficiency in parking that's identified, no further reductions in parking would be allowed for that site.
Okay. And then the parking systems, I mean, I understand when I go into a large mall and there's parking, there's no parking on this level, go to level 2. It helps with queuing. I don't have to worry. I just know where to go. I'm not 100% sure how many people will use it. So again, I think somebody did bring up is, where does it come up with, if somebody, is there evidence that it's worth a 10% reduction in parking to use these, I guess what I would call, the smart technology? Is that?
What I would probably say is that the smart parking systems eliminate the congestion and health and safety issues in terms of the queuing of vehicles. Because if a vehicle comes in and sees that it's empty, they're not going to sit idle in the parking lot for the whole time. So I think that's where they get that 10% reduction is that we're going to have less queuing.
Okay, I got 10% canopy, so it's at maturity. I assume that there's going to be landscape maintenance requirements, just like if it was a brand new project, they're putting in new landscaping, they got to be maintained. I'm just curious, because they put in a tree in the middle of a parking lot, there's probably no irrigation, but that would probably be more the property owner who's asking for that reduction to help assist a new tenant that's maybe coming in. So, I mean, I just want to make sure that, probably they're going to have to bring in a water tank or something to water these trees. I just want to make sure I'm understanding that, how else it'll.
Yeah, absolutely. Landlords are required to maintain their property, so if they have dead and dying landscape, then that would be a code enforcement issue with the city.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Roth, you have one more question?
Yeah, thank you. To piggyback on a question that Commissioner Stein just asked, in the example that he laid out in which, 3 high-use parking uses going into one unoccupied building could create traffic conditions that could be, deemed public health, et cetera. The process at which, though, that those 3 individual businesses would come before the city, they would be still pulling business licenses and would still be analyzing based off of what uses they're coming in, and therefore 1, 2 come in, and then 6 months later, number 3 comes in, and we know that's going to be a material impact on the parking. That conversation can happen then before, I don't want to say a denial, but I just want to, there would be some sort of stopgap in which we would have an awareness of 3 businesses all coming into one, unoccupied building with high use cases. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I'd say that the way that most shopping malls function is you have some anchors that are the larger stores, and then you have some of the smaller stores that are dispersed. And a lot of the smaller stores don't have as big of an impact on the total parking demand for the site. So if you're interchanging those smaller uses within those shopping centers, it's not really going to have a substantial impact on the total parking demand for the entire shopping center. So I think that's where the idea comes from, is limiting that 5,000 square foot threshold, because if you're not also applying that to the anchor tenancies that really supply most of the parking demand for the shopping center, you shouldn't have as big of an issue with any change outs in tenancies.
Great, thank you.
So just to clarify that, the larger, if it's a mixed-use development with large retail, and would you call 5,000 square feet to 2,500 square feet medium use? Or mid-size use?
Say medium to small even.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with medium to small size business use cases, if you have a tenant that's in that space, and then you have a larger, grocery store or, big box retail that's in that space, what you're saying is that the ratio for the larger space offsets and supplements the lower space that might have had some sort of reduction in requirement in order to streamline them into the property.
Exactly. So for instance, like at the Wizens Market Square, a large part of their parking demand is the Canyon Club.
Correct.
So the Canyon Club has a lot of parking demand because it's a really big space and a lot of people come to go there to gather. But all of the other tenants within the Wizens Market Square that are under 5,000 square feet really don't have a huge impact on the parking demand for the entire site. Obviously, cumulatively, they have a significant impact, but if you're looking, not every single use that's going to go into the Wizens Market Square is going to be that 1 to 200. So that's where we're kind of limiting the total impact throughout the center.
And looking at the staggered business hours. So, the larger demand, like from the Canyon Club, typically happens in the evening during, a show that might be occurring there. Whereas the interior design businesses that are, between 2,500 and 5,000 square feet primarily operate during the day so that the, bless you, so that the demand is not all at once, generally speaking.
Exactly.
Okay. And one question about the determinations for the different categories in the reductions that just popped out was the experiential retail being, and I had to go there. So one of the questions I had was, why would experiential retail not be categorized the same as an art museum? Because they sort of focus on a similar functionality, and I noticed that the threshold for a pop-up experiential retail space was significantly less than an art gallery, and based on my own experiences, it would seem that you would spend an equal or greater amount of time occupying a space if you were in an experiential retail space.
So experiential retail is it's such a broad category that we thought to align it with other retail uses, which are typically 1 per 300 or 1 per 250. But we can always adjust the parking ratio for experiential retail and maybe have it align with whatever similar use that the director may apply, an unlisted use to be. So that would just really be up to the Planning Commission. But 1 per 300 was a solid number for smaller spaces in experiential retail, and that's including all types of use.
All encompassing.
Yeah, all encompassing.
The all encompassing of experiential. So
yeah.
So if there were a specific subgenre that might be red flagged for being a for being a gray area, right? Then that would be at the discretion of the director whether they would either approve it ministerially or defer it to the planning commission for further scrutiny?
Yes, it could.
Okay. All right, great. That concludes my questions for this section. So moving on to section, oh, I'm sorry, did you not get to go, or at all? Apologies.
Yeah, I didn't go.
I apologize, Vice Chair Sharon.
It's okay.
Profusely.
It's all good, it's all good. So I had a few questions about the smart parking. I have never seen smart parking not in a parking structure. Is that the intended purpose of smart parking?
Until someone comes up with better technology.
Yeah, okay. So I just don't know, do we have parking structures in Agoura that would like qualify for this? It seemed kind of out, like when I saw smart parking systems, I thought something else actually. So I was just curious where do we have parking structures that could utilize this? Or is this, like, what's the purpose?
So it's essentially just to offer an option for existing property owners who are really struggling, and if they are willing to create a structure or subterranean parking, that could be an option for them. But it's really just another option for future developers if they needed to reduce the parking. They don't have to use it, but it's there as an option. And if technology gets better and better systems for outdoor use come about, then that could potentially be something that property owners can consider.
Understood. And so this is really just for commercial space, not residential, multifamily, stuff like that, right?
Yes, so the parking reductions is specifically for commercial uses.
Okay. And then I didn't see any sort of incentive for EV charging, and I think that I would like to just like see if bring it to the commission, seeing if that's something that we would want to propose, and if that is something that you guys have considered, and if it was, why wasn't it included? If there's something that we don't know or should consider.
EV parking is already allowed by right. So it's actually currently building permit only, so we don't even issue zoning clearances for it. It's just allowed to go in.
Not parking, but charging,
Yeah,
charging.
EV charging stations as well.
Okay, but do they get a benefit if they put in a few spots? Do they get a reduction in available parking in the parking lot?
Only for the van accessible one. So if you put in a van accessible one, it counts as 2 spaces,
Okay.
essentially.
Would that be something that you think would benefit landlords and strip mall owners and stuff like that to add more? If they put for every, I don't know, 4 chargers, they can get 1 spot reduced. I don't know. You guys know a good mathematical equation to it, but would that be something that you think would incentivize? Because I know we have a high demand in chargers. I drive by the one on Canaan and Thousand Oaks Boulevard all the time, and there's always a line through the parking lot that actually causes congestion. So, but it's before the Tesla supercharger is the only option in Agoura. So just kind of I think it would be beneficial.
It's definitely something we could consider. Actually, 2 of our larger shopping centers already have the charging stations.
Right.
So there are already incentives to putting it in. For instance, if you have a Tesla charging station, the owner gets paid by Tesla to have them there.
Right.
And then on top of that, their regular vehicles can no longer park there. So those vehicle charging stations, if they're not fully occupied, do already reduce the parking capacity if they're not 100% used for the EV vehicles. So it's just something we'd have to think through a little bit.
Okay, so you guys see it more as a business model versus a incentive?
I think so.
Okay,
yeah.
that makes sense. And then, are there going to be any different requirements for parking in the Agoura Village business district, since we're kind of encouraging a pedestrian space versus a car-centric space?
So all of the ABSP parking defers to the zoning ordinance requirements for parking.
Okay. And, can you say that again?
So all parking for ABSP would have to comply with the zoning ordinance regulations.
Okay, got it. Okay. All right, those were, I think, my questions. I guess I want to just go back to the canopy conversation of like how is that going to be managed and maintained? You know, so if somebody puts a tree in and let's say they put a tree in to put trees in, and then they never manage any irrigation to it and they die, maybe it takes 2 years to die because there's natural weather patterns and it like gets water. There's a code enforcement, but is that a fine and then, like a fix-it ticket almost? But then they don't do anything about it, but they already got the parking spaces. So they just like let the trees die and they say, okay, we'll clean it up, but that could look like removing the trees, for example. So I'm just wondering, how are we managing this new project that we're incentivizing people with?
I guess first, we require an approved site plan in order to do that. So we already have that approved site plan that tells you what the center is supposed to look like, and so we can monitor it that way. But what I'd say is that 99.9% of the time, we will not even have to monitor it because it is highly beneficial for the landlord to maintain good-looking landscaping. Otherwise, they're not going to have tenants. So I wouldn't anticipate having that issue, but if it does become an issue, we can always enforce that.
Okay, and then just to be clear, all of these modifications or incentives are really on the responsibility almost, or the choice of the landlord, not the tenant. So if the tenant is coming in with a business permit, and they require certain parking, are you guys gonna be deferring to the landlord for, hey, we can't approve your tenant in this capacity because of the parking? Are you going to work with the tenant to manage this? Because I don't know if new businesses necessarily know the nuances of like having a landlord walk them through occupying their lease. A lot of them are very green if they're opening a new business. So how is that going to be able to translate? Is that on the city's responsibility, or the applicant saying, oh, I didn't qualify for the parking, and I can't make any of these changes because I'm not the landlord, so I'm going to walk away from the opportunity?
So if the reduction required some type of modification to the entire parking lot, that would be the tenant's responsibility to reach out to the property owner and let them know that I can't meet these parking requirements. What can I do to make that happen? In some of the reductions, like for example, the modification, the simple change of use, those don't really require property owner intervention, but the property owners do still have to sign off on it since they sign leases with the tenants, so they are aware of all tenants that occupy a tenant space in their shopping centers.
Right.
And if I could just chime in here real fast too, I think you perfectly explained why we're coming in and doing this change, because that is a cumbersome process that we deal with every day, working with new tenants coming in and having to finagle all the parking requirements and work with the owner and the tenant, and then there's tension between everybody. And so creating these thresholds of having allowed uses come in without looking at the parking at all based on a set of criteria is highly beneficial in streamlining that process, and that's why we've kind of proposed this.
Understood. No, I mean, I totally understand the the ease for like use, transitions between tenancies. That I totally understand. I think when I look at this and I see van pool and I see smart system parking and beautification and that kind of stuff is just not something a tenant would ever take on. So I'm just wondering, is the incentive of the landlord that like, oh, I can reduce this by, like up to 15% doing these things. So now none of my tenants ever have to worry about parking ever again, like in the process, is that what, and I get something in exchange for beautification or modification or something like that. Okay. All right. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I saw that Commissioner Plotzer had a follow-up.
Yeah. What happens to existing properties like Ralph's, Vons? Can they come in and modify it and reduce it with each tenant, new tenant that moves in?
So they could apply, but the property owner would have to sign on to that reduction if they were to request for a reduction.
That's what I'm asking. So the owner of these areas can come in and modify their parking, correct? Even though they pre-existed these changes, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Just real quick, what kind of outreach will the city do with the existing landlords that they're now going to be, these remedies are going to be available for them to reduce parking? I mean, how are we going to let them know that if they're not? We're not
Absolutely. We have an economic development team. We're in pretty much constant communication with all of our landowners and really all the commercial landlords in the city. So we would definitely have those conversations.
I just want to make sure I got you. You're good? Okay. Okay. My one last question is, so as you talked about the reduction incentives that are delineated here that would be under, ministerial discretion, there is a cap, right? So to Commissioner Plotzer's earlier question about being able to reduce, by 20 or 25% the stacking, would the cap hinder that? If in certain cases, right? So if they were applying for maybe 4 programs in a particular property and that 20 or 25% reduction exceeded the cap that you discussed earlier, then the cap would be the number that would be used, and it would be less than 25%.
So, if I'm understanding your question correctly, so we have we look at individual tenant spaces that are coming in that we look at on an individual basis that are 5,000 square feet or less. That is kind of separate from the total parking that's required of the site.
Right.
So they can essentially reduce the total parking that is required of the site based on the uses up to 5 or 10% based on the things that they do, stacking cumulatively. So those are two kind of separate reductions, but yes, we would work with the owner on those issues.
Okay, all right. And I've inspired Vice Chair Sharon with one more question.
Yes, I apologize. So going back to the smart parking system, so I was just thinking a little bit more about it, and so we see that big parking structure being developed right next to the freeway, and housing is coming in there, but it's also, it technically is zoned as mixed use, and so would they be the perfect candidate for smart parking where they're actually getting like additional housing, but now they can qualify for reduced parking? Is that like the scenario we could potentially be facing because they add this smart parking technology?
No. So the parking in the parking structure for the Regency site is pretty much exclusively for the residential area. And then there's going to be 40 on-site, on-street parking spaces for the 5,000 square feet of commercial. So the residential parking is completely separate. And so we wouldn't apply any parking reductions to the structure for them for smart parking. And they actually have, so if you live on the second floor, there's going to be individual spaces for the residents that live on the second floor in the second floor of that parking structure. So that essentially there wouldn't be a need to do that because most of the parking is assigned actually.
Okay, so, okay. That was important to me to clarify. Thank you.
And if I may jump on this one, I was hoping housing and parking was not going to come up because for all the obvious reasons in our city right now, but the state has preempted local authority in a lot of these decisions, both on housing and then in relation to housing and parking. Is that correct?
That is correct. For housing developments that meet minimum affordability, we have a set amount of parking ratios that we can require legally.
Got it. And so this is to affect the smaller businesses in the commercial areas of our city that fall outside of the housing category for the most part, though we do have commercial mixed use in certain instances. But in those cases, the state would preempt anything we did tonight anyway.
Exactly. So that's why this item really has nothing to do with housing. It only applies to the commercial businesses.
And just wanted to add that if there are commercial parking spaces within those mixed-use developments that include residential, only the commercial parking spaces would qualify for reductions.
I appreciate that clarification. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you for everybody's fantastic and well-thought-out questions. Moving on to Section 4, the Agoura Village specific plan. I'm going to mix it up a little bit, and I will start with Commissioner Platzer.
I really have no questions. It seems straightforward. 10% modifications as long as they comply with their architecture and what's laid out. So I have no questions.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Stein?
So somebody's in there, they actually think of, they're having a larger renovation, but they want to now break it up into successive projects. How are we going to control that? Is it just a one-time?
Once we adopt this regulation, you would have your building footprint, and we wouldn't essentially allow excessive, building 10%, 10%, 10%. And then on top of that, you also have the development standards for the AVSP, and any 10% reduction wouldn't be able to exceed the floor area ratio requirement for that particular project. So those are kind of the two safeguards to that.
And this will also be for facade improvements as well?
That's correct.
So I'm just curious, would there be a heightened review? Because I know that everybody is very concerned about what someone comes in and now saying, well, we want to go through this process. Would that still be reviewed at a heightened level versus just, okay, well, I'm going to be doing this and let me have it kind of, I just want to make sure that it's.
So staff would still evaluate the project against the typical zoning ordinance requirements, the general plan, and the architectural design guidelines, even if it doesn't go through an Agoura Village development permit.
And I know that there's several non-conforming buildings. So will they be brought into greater conformity, or they're going to be grandfathered in because of this non-conforming? I just want to make sure that there's no additional burdens all of a sudden because they're taking advantage of this.
So they would still have to be conforming to the development standards. They would not be able to exacerbate the nonconformity.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Vice Chair Sharon?
My only question was, I actually came in earlier today and I asked the question and got clarity, but I feel like other people might have the same question. And so I was unclear that, let's take the Wisden Center shopping mall. So each individual tenant can make modifications at 10% of the maximum footprint of the entire Wisden Center. So that's correct, right? I understood that correctly?
Correct.
Yeah, so it really, I think, I have no other questions. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. And thanks for your time earlier so that I could understand this better.
Commissioner Roth, apologies.
Thank you.
I was making sure that I was switching up the order on everyone to keep everyone on their toes.
Deference to the vice chair, but I appreciate it. My questions are, okay, so related to Commissioner Stein asked about a facade, and Vice Chair Sharon just asked about the 10% as a, against kind of the property. My question is like, on the facade front, is a project something that is changing? If someone is, we'll just use the Wisdens as an example. If they're changing the facade and the property owner wants to tile the front of the facade where there's currently, wood or whatever, is that fallen? Like, I'm kind of confused, like what a project is and how that would meet, like a facade would meet the 10% of the floor area, given that they're two different planes. Like, I'm struggling to understand like what a project is, what an alteration is, with these thresholds.
Yeah, so you have the floor area of the actual building footprint on the site. And so let's just say you have a 20,000 square foot building on a site. Any alteration or modification that would not increase that 20,000 square foot threshold or that 20,000 square foot building by 10%, essentially you can add 2,000 square feet to that 20,000 square foot building and fall under the administrative threshold. And so the refacing the facade wouldn't change that, but if you were changing the architectural design of the building, that's one of the protections that we put in place there, because the AVSP has very specific design requirements that we really want to review and make sure that it really does conform to the village environment. So if you're substantially altering the architectural character of the building, that's when we still require the AVDP.
So my question then is, an alteration, sorry, let me reframe this. In most instances, this would only be applicable if there's an addition to the property that is greater than 10%. Alterations that would impact the architecture would would fall out of exemption.
Exactly.
Okay, so I appreciate, I'm going to echo Commissioner Vice Chair Sharon's appreciation for staff on this, because I'm still struggling to fully understand the language, because I think there's the use of alteration and addition, I think, are very clear differences. And but my example that I asked for staff was, if a property wants to redo the tile within their own, sorry, a tenant wants to redo the flooring within their own property, that would now be an exempt category. That's something that doesn't add 10% or greater to the overall property. They could change the interior, lighting fixtures, windows. Well, windows are separate. We had that discussion too because of window regulations, but like tiling, things like that wouldn't necessarily trigger the $12,000 deposit to getting a AVDP. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
And just to add, even as it stands now, if they are only modifying the interior and they're not adding floor area, it still wouldn't require an AVDP.
On the AVDP, one of the questions that I asked staff was cost. I see $12,000. I think the entire intent of tonight is phenomenal, and that we are trying to streamline processes for businesses in our community to either stay here, remain here, or come into our community. And I see a number like that, and I'm like, oh, that's a heavy lift. Can you help us as commissioners understand what the $12,000 is needed for, what that kind of accounts for and accommodates through this process?
So the $4,000 deposit is a conceptual review. Usually applicants, before they formally submit, they want to get a better understanding of how the city feels about the project. So with a concept review, I believe we bring it to LUEDC, get some of the city council's input on it. When they feel comfortable with that, then they can proceed with a formal application, which is the $8,000 deposit. And so the $8,000 deposit plus the $4,000 deposit is essentially covering staff time, consultant time, and any other time amongst the city employees that are spent towards the project.
Okay, thank you. Given it seems like a pretty sizable change here in terms of almost all projects needing the ABDP, and therefore that deposit plus additional cost to staff. If this change were to proceed tonight, what volume, I guess, like, what's the delta now? Like, how many of these how many AVDPs go away as a result of this? And like, over the past few years, like, how many of these ADVPs have been pulled versus how many would materially go away as a result of the modification tonight?
So I personally have maybe processed 2 ABDPs in the 7 years that I've been here. We don't get a lot of projects that that require an ABDP. So usually ABDPs require extensive amount of staff time and consultant time, which explains why there's an $8,000 deposit. But the ABSP itself doesn't carve out smaller projects that don't need an ABDP. So it's hard to say what the delta would be because I've only processed 2.
Yeah, I guess I'll save some more for deliberation on this, but appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. And follow up.
I don't know if it will help you if this would help you, but when I came in earlier, I asked, an example we used was if Tifa wanted to add a canopy on their sunny side patio, like, they wouldn't have to spend $12,000 just to get us, cover, maybe 100 square feet of shade. So, like, to me, like, that seems exorbitant for the project they want to go forward with, and so, like, that made more sense because they're a small business in our town. So I don't know if it's helpful or not, but want to share.
Okay, so that triggers a question in my mind, but thank you. I like the Tifa example. Staff is going to still spend time, but now we're not getting city fees. How does that affect the budget? I'm just looking out for the bigger picture.
Well, so we still collect fees, they just won't be as much. And on top of that, the AVDP fees are actually deposits. So the reason why we require a deposit for the AVDP currently is because there's such a wild variance in the amount of time that is spent by staff depending on the complexity of the project. So if you have smaller projects, we do flat fees because there's not as much variance in the amount of time that staff is spending. So it would be a smaller fee. On the flip side, if we get new tenants coming in faster, we get more sales tax also. So I would say in the long run, it would probably be a net positive to the city as long as we have tenants in spaces more often.
Well, I also just look at what it's costing the city to have a planning commission meeting. So if we can avoid that, I'm sure there's savings there too. So I just want to, I see both sides. Thank you.
At least a few $100 a meeting, right? So with that, one thing I guess I wanted to just clarify on the fiscal impact is you're not, if Tifa, for example, wanted to do the canopy, and it's obviously a small project, you would be tying up $8,000 to $12,000 of their working capital for the duration of the permitting and approval process, and it might really only cost, as far as resources and what you end up billing for time, let's say $3,000. So part of this whole procedure would streamline that, but you would still be assessing city time and resources. It would just be at whatever the rate was in order to ministerially approve the process. So it would reduce the cost, but it would also avoid tying up working capital for small businesses that might hinder them from doing the improvements in the first place, correct?
Exactly.
Okay, great. See, I guess that career in finance actually did pay off.
Okay.
Okay, so one more.
All right.
Commissioner Platzer.
Presently, 4,000 and 8,000, is that refundable, or is that, the money's gone?
Yeah, just with any deposit, we bill against the deposit, and then any remaining is returned to the applicant once the project's closed out.
That's based on hours, right?
Yes, so both for city staff and for the consultant. So city staff has a flat hourly rate based on our use classification for staff, and then we get bills from our consultants, think landscape architects, think geotechnical engineers, that bill us for their time spent on projects. So we take all that into account.
Okay.
And to clarify, there is no profit motive. It is just whatever the cost is, just for the public at large.
Exactly. We are only allowed to recover our costs for any permit, really.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, just wanted to clarify that for the world. Okay, thank you. One more, see, now I've done it, Travis, I'm
Oh, no,
sorry.
Sorry, just a point of clarification for the record. So I think Katrina might have mentioned this, but the language that we're suggesting for the ABSP on the slide, if you could pull that up, is actually different than what was posted online. So this is the language that, well, at least for part G, that we're asking the commission to consider this evening.
Okay, so I guess we'll call this bonus section 4. Does any commissioner have any clarifying questions related to this modification? Commissioner Platzer.
Yes, can you elaborate on subject to the Agoura Village Development Permit unless exempt pursuant to Section E, exempt project of Chapter 7 administration? To me, that's gobbledygook. I don't understand that.
Oh, so if you turn to Exhibit B of the staff report, the last page of that exhibit, which is page 104 of the ABSP, we remove some language which set a threshold for modifications to a non-conforming use or building. Originally, we left it hanging at renovations period, but we thought to clarify where then would they, what provision would they go under if they were to modify a non-conforming building. So we wanted to add language that defers back to Section E, exempt projects, which is the new section that we created under Chapter 7.
Okay, thank you, Katrina. Okay, so now that we've gotten through all 4 sections, congratulations, everybody. Before we close the public hearing, I'm sorry. We're going to the public hearing. Yes, public comment. Public comment. I need caffeine. All right. It's been a meaty one tonight, guys. So now that we've exhausted our questions of city staff, we will move on to public comments. And thank you for your patience. If you have something to distribute to the Planning Commission, please hand it to our city clerk. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. Written comments submitted by individuals may not be read aloud by another speaker. I will now defer to the city clerk for public comments.
Thank you. We did not receive any written correspondence. We do not have any remote participants, but we do have a speaker card. Stacy McKinney.
Thank you and welcome.
Do I hit green?
Yes, so you will, I have instructions I have to read.
Okay.
Okay, so you will have 3 minutes to speak. There is no green light on the podium. Your time begins when you start speaking. When the yellow light appears, you will have 30 seconds to finish before the light turns red, and then your time is up. And please adjust the microphone, and you may begin your comments.
Okay. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Stacy McKinney. My husband Brian couldn't be here tonight, but this is a project we built together. And I'm here on behalf of both of us in support of the zoning amendments your staff is bringing forward. We've been developing a concept we call the doghouse, a private membership Katrina Garcia, who encouraged us to be here tonight, and we're grateful for the guidance. I'm not here to pitch our business. I'm here because we believe this kind of interactive use is exactly what Agoura Hills is missing, exactly what the families moving into this area are looking for. Agoura Hills is just over 7,000 households. Statewide, roughly 2 in 5 households own a dog, which means thousands of dogs likely call this city their home right now. And none of them, have anywhere in town to relax, run, and let their owners connect with their neighbors. This gap is real, and the amendments you're considering tonight would open the door to uses that are community building by nature. They're low impact, locally driven, and aligned with how people actually want to spend time in the city they live in. We're Agoura Hills residents, and we want to build something here for here. We ask for your support on these changes. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Thanks.
Okay. Before closing the public hearing, wait, let me just make sure I got everything here. Okay. Before closing the public hearing, does any commissioner have any further questions of staff? Commissioner Roth.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I'm going to die on this hill. I'm looking at the draft city council SPA resolution document. I'm referring to the very bottom of the document, page 8. I don't know if we can pull it up, but it's the Agoura specific village plan where you can see the actual red line changes that we are voting on tonight. I still don't think that there's enough clarity in the changes that we're proposing to target, to help, if I'm struggling to understand these and I look at this and I see some of this language and I'm like, this is somewhat confusing to me as a planning commissioner, I can only imagine that a business coming into our community might also still be confused as well. So I'm going to read this aloud and how I see this. But one of the changes is that all projects, and then there's a strike through, requiring an AVDP must follow the 3-step process. So that's a change. And then if you go to the AVDP section, it says any new development, redevelopment, or substantial renovation of existing property shall require an AVDP. I think we could have clarifying language right there. I do know that there's the exempt project section below that we're adding, and I will get there in a second. On the exempt projects, again, alterations and repairs to existing buildings, structures, or other improvements that do not exceed 10% of existing approved floor area and do not substantially modify the current existing architectural character of the buildings and structures on the property. So again, having the conversation that we've had tonight, which has been nuanced, and we've had access to staff to understand that, I still almost, again, I get it, but I still think that there could be clarity in the language there. Because I read alteration and repair to be something substantially different than a 10% addition to a property. And I think it would behoove us to future-proof this to make sure that future applicants or future businesses coming to our community, they see that. And I think, again, alteration, 10% of the property, oh shoot, do I have to go get an AVDP and spend $12,000 because I want to modify the tile on my property? And I think that doesn't necessarily come clean in how this language is currently written. This is erring on deliberation, so I suppose I will push this back to staff as a question, which is, can we have some discussion tonight in our deliberation about a potential amendment to the staff recommendation to provide a little further clarity in this section, should my fellow commissioners think that further clarity should be added?
Absolutely. I think that if I'm hearing you correctly, one such modification may be alterations, repairs, and additions to existing buildings, blah, blah, blah. So something similar to that could kind of capture that addition, but open to other suggestions as well once everyone deliberates.
But if I may, the way I understood the conversation earlier is that alterations and repairs almost always would not be applicable. It's really just the additions, unless if those alteration and repairs alter the architectural design of these properties or of these businesses.
So currently, the AVSP is incredibly broad. Mm-hmm. If you read it broadly, you could argue that anything that requires a building permit may require an AVDP. So that's why we're adding that exempt project threshold to essentially provide an objective, measurable threshold for projects that are administratively approvable.
Okay. Would it be beneficial then, in addition to the language that you proposed, the existing approved floor area? Again, I think if I were a property owner or a new tenant coming in, et cetera, I would read that and think, oh, that's 10% of the occupant of the space that I am going to occupy, not to the clarifying point, that Vice Chair Sharon mentioned earlier, against the total of wherever that property, wherever that business might be against the total property that it is part of. I know this is like really wonky and there's probably like one or two words that we could put in here to clean this up, but I still read this and I'm like, future commissions and future community development directors might take a different, and future Travises might take a different lens on the language here and say, well, an alteration is removing tile,
Yeah, no, I totally appreciate those comments. I can definitely recommend some language. I think, like I already said, alterations, repairs, and additions, and then for the floor areas section that do not exceed 10% of the existing floor area approved on the lot, because all development standards are tied to the legal lot on which they sit. Yeah. So if you tie in the whole lot, I think that would clarify that you're allowed a 10% increase to the building area that's approved on the entire lot. So that might be something
to
I think consider.
We'll get to deliberation. The Tifa example I think is a great one. Tifa's obviously been here for a long time, so they might be very savvy on this, but and know how to reach out to staff. But if you're flipping through and you read that, you might be discouraged from doing a small shade cell outside because you're like, oh, it's an alteration and it's going to be more than 10% of my square footage. But if it's against the sum total of the Wizens, that's 0.001%. It's infinitesimal compared to the sum total of the property. So I think those modifications would improve the language here and give more clarity for future planning commissioners, staff, and the business community here in our city.
Besides the clarification that Commissioner Roth is asking for, just as a additional point of clarification, would there be language on the planning department's FAQs on the city website that could be added that would provide guidance or some sort of path for the streamlined process? And is that something that we would need to delineate, or is that something that is sort of a standard business practice, that there would be communications not only to the Economic Development Committee, but that, when a potential business owner goes onto the city website looking for resources and information on how to get started, that there could be some sort of language that shows that there are these new procedures in place?
Yes, I think that would just be a general good practice for us to do, is to have a handout of practices for Agoura Village development permits and what's exempt. So we could definitely do that.
Okay.
Can I just get a little bit more clarification? I know that Commissioner Stein brought this up, but so we're going to focus on the Wisdom Center just for in this example, but like if it's, let's say the Wisdom Center is 20,000 square feet and they can add a 2,000 square foot structure with like without going through the entire AVDP process, and that's like a whole nother unit for retail. So they can add another unit for retail just anywhere because they, like at the end of one of the ends of the strip mall or something, because they, because of this. And then now they're a 22,000 square foot facility, and now they can add another unit that's 2,200, 2,200 units. And like, what actually does stop someone from saying, oh, it's been 2 years, I'm going to do it again. 2 years, I'm going to do it again, until we have like a monstrosity that like is not the intended purpose of the facility.
I think that's a good point. You could definitely add some clarifying language here as well to kind of to clarify that the existing approved floor area is limited to that existing as of a certain date. You could do that. There's also existing maximum floor area ratios that are approved for sites. So we already have regulations that are in place that allow only a certain floor area ratio for an entire site. I don't know off the top of my head if the Wizens is at that maximum ratio or not. I don't believe they're quite there yet, but yeah, so those are some considerations.
Would it be, I'm sorry.
Sorry, and again, to clarify, any of these projects would still have to comply with all of the original parameters that exist in the city related to commercial development and standards and practices.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so there are already stopgaps that are in place to stop some of these loopholes that you might be seeing. I just wanted to clarify that there's still a very stringent set of compliances that have to occur in order for the development to happen. It's just at the discretion of the development director based on, it being a smaller scaled project, correct?
That's correct. And what I might recommend is that once we move to deliberation, once we deliberate, and if we have any recommended changes, we could take a 5-minute recess, if that is the direction of the Planning Commission, to go back, propose some language, and then come back and see if when we can do some tinkering during the deliberation.
Okay.
Can I suggest maybe and Travis and Robbie, please tell me your opinion. In alterations and repairs to existing building structures, and then remove other improvements that do not or other improvements. Basically, people can make small alterations and repairs to their units, but not like, when you say other improvements, you're kind of like opening the door to like they can build to capacity, and then there is a stopgap, but like, that might look very like, okay, so let's say a place their stopgap is 25,000 square feet, and they're only at, 15,000 square feet, they can push this, this new exemption to the max at 25,000 square feet. Like, how do we prevent, like, new construction that isn't going through the process that we designed the city to go through?
What I'll say is, it wouldn't be worth it for a property owner to keep on doing these little mini expansions, because the cost of a permit, essentially to fall under that exemption criteria and to keep on doing it year after year after year, they might as well just propose it all at once, right? It's gonna be not beneficial for the property owner to keep on doing these little additions just to skirt regulations. So I would say it's highly unlikely that a property owner would go in with that intention to keep on doing the mini modifications, because it would actually be financially not as good for them to do that rather than just doing everything at once.
If I may, I understand, it seems like you might have a little concern with, it seems like you might be concerned that we could open this up to
Can I just stop real quick? Let's move into deliberations.
It's
because
not a deliberative question. Sorry, it's not deliberation. I'll get to a real question. I
Okay.
apologize.
Yeah, if we're getting
It's just
into,
Yes,
we're
I-
starting to get murky, so.
No, for
Yeah.
sure. I fully understand.
Yeah,
My question is to avoid the appearance that we are opening up a slippery slope for the concept or that was just laid out by Vice Chair Sharon. Would we be able to consider language? So there's alterations and repairs. There is substantial modification, do not substantially modify the existing architectural character of the building. Could we throw something in the architectural character as well as structural character to encompass the proposed, adding on addition after addition or something like that? Sorry, I know I didn't mean to cut off, but that's the
Yeah.
question I was.
I think what would make the most sense, if you want to put a stopgap on the 10%, like the continual 10% improvements, is just to define what an existing structure is and what the 10% would be based on. So you could say 10% of the floor area of the lot as existing on the date of adoption of this ordinance, or you could do January 1st, 2027. You could say something like that, so that if you know what the floor area of the lot is on that date, you can't go past that 10% threshold that existed on that date without going to the Planning Commission, basically.
Yeah, do we have language around like semi-permanence? So for the other example of like a shade cell or a, sorry, my caffeine is also drawing low. But like an outdoor canopy or like a structure like that, that's more semi-permanent and not necessarily like a 2,000 square foot addition. Could we add language in there where does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's tied to floor area right now. So if you do have a canopy, but you don't have a finished floor underneath it, that wouldn't actually count towards your floor area. So it just depends on what the type of addition is.
I have just a real quick question before we go to deliberations. This is for Travis. Are we supposed to at all question staff about CEQA? Because I don't have any, but I just want to make sure we didn't jump, because we didn't talk about it.
you're welcome to ask questions about CEQA.
Okay, thank you, okay.
Does staff, does the commission have any questions about CEQA related to this project?
There's no construction, so that's why we're saying it's exempt. I just want to be clear on that. I know
Right.
it was presented, but I want to make sure
Well-
that that's why we're going to be able to exempt this.
So, well, it's actually interesting, like if, in this exemption project, if we're adding 2,000 square feet of additional space or retail space, wouldn't that trigger CEQA, and wouldn't that now have to come to the planning commission?
Not necessarily. So every project is looked at individually for CEQA. So if you were doing an addition of 10% of the floor area, we would look at the CEQA exemption criteria, and if it falls under one of those exemptions, then it would be exempt. But if it doesn't fall cleanly under one of the exemption criteria, then it may not be. But generally speaking, a 10% increase would almost certainly be exempt. And they would have to come to the city for a permit regardless, which makes us look at CEQA just always. So whether or not it's an administrative permit or a planning commission level permit wouldn't really change that.
And if I could just add, so the CEQA analysis that's before you as part of this item tonight is sort of within the bounds of you know, what the zoning amendment, the special plan amendment is. And right now, there is no construction specifically being proposed under this project. So that's the CEQA analysis that you're running through. And to Commissioner Stein's question, the CEQA findings are going to be part of the findings you're making tonight. So that's sort of the commission saying that they are able to make the findings under CEQA that are necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Travis, can I ask you, do you have any recommendations on what we're trying, with this is a question, right? Because not a deliberation, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to deliberations.
Yeah, I'll suggest, I think, if there are no other questions on the zone amendment and the specific plan amendment now, I think we can go ahead, close the public hearing, and I think it would be helpful for me and for staff if we get feedback from each of the commissioners about what kinds of changes you'd like to see, and then we can take it back and do some drafting and then bring it back to you for review.
Okay, before we go to deliberate, I do want to recognize Stacy coming forward. So this is an unlisted use that she's not coming forward. This is the whole idea of what we're trying to do, is to allow her to come talk with staff and decide whether or not this should become now a listed use. Because I want to acknowledge her for coming
Commissioner
forward.
Stein, I just want to, again, caution that your statement, while admirable, is on the border of being deliberative, because it does reflect opinion, even though we're very happy you're here. So let's close the hearing and start deliberations, because I think we're all raring to go. Okay. All right. So with that, we will I will now close the public hearing. And we will move on to deliberations, and we will call on each commissioner. And Commissioner Stein, since I did just, I didn't mean to pick on you. I just wanted to call it out that we want to make sure we're deliberating where to deliberate and questioning where to question. So I will defer to you, sir.
So how I look at this, the economic development objective is reasonable. The central policy question to me is whether the city can streamline routine approvals without sacrificing objective standards, public notice, consistent administration, enforceability. Again, I'm supporting reducing unnecessary barriers. I've now heard other commissioners talk about, and I do have some questions. I actually would like to maybe see a little clarification on that one section. Other than that, I can make all the findings, but I would go along with any other changes.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Stein. Commissioner Platzer?
This document is pretty meaty. I spent hours, and I think it's long overdue, because we're losing a lot of businesses, and some good businesses like these lovely people here, and we need we need some money in the coffer, right? So I agree with Commissioner Roth and Sharon that there may be some clarification, but I can make all the findings.
Thank you. Commissioner Roth?
Yeah, thank you very much. I would definitely echo both Commissioner Platzer and Commissioner Stein's comments and feedback. I think that in all my conversations, as I've been a planning commissioner for the past 4 years with any business owner in this community and most of our residents, is the uphill climb of going through the permitting process and the difficulty it is to obtain permits and understand what's the process looks like for them. And so any streamlining of this to encourage business in our community, I think, is absolutely such low-hanging fruit. So I'm very glad that this came before us tonight. I'm very glad to participate in this conversation. My two feedback kind of proposed amendments to what we have before us tonight. I believe that the smart parking, I think was mentioned, being seen much more in kind of mall type settings, multi-floor parking structures, et cetera. We don't have a lot of that in our community, and so I think, and it seems like based off of Katrina's comments, the fruit to be the fruit to bear with that type of innovation for our community might be some time away. I love the idea of encouraging our current tenants, our current property owners, and creating more canopy space. As a former Agoura High student and getting out of school and walking across to go to Italia Deli and walking through that parking lot with almost no shade, it's very brutal in the middle of August where it could be 120 plus 130 degrees at the surface level. And so I think increasing any canopy is something we should encourage all of our properties to be doing. I'm going to die on this hill. I don't think that's enough of incentive. I do believe that we should consider the 10% incentive for the smart technology. I think is much more unlikely to ever happen. Versus, I do think if we increase the possibility of inverting the two, so having a 10% threshold for increased canopy and then a 5% threshold for the smart technology, I think is something we should consider so we don't run into, I think as Commissioner Platzer laid out, the concerns of a, kind of an unwieldy, like if you stack all these up, all of a sudden you have no parking ratio. So that's one, would be eager to have a conversation around that. The second one, I think it's pretty clear that there's, again, I think the intent of what we are trying to do with the AVSP and ensuring that the current tenants who are that fall within the AVSP don't have to go through the burdensome process. I think we should make this as clear as possible as what is applicable and what is exempt. And I think the way I read the exemption is still a little unclear to me. So I welcome Travis and Robbie's future proposed amendments to us to see if we can find some cleanup that we can agree to tonight. And with that, I can make all the findings. I appreciate this running a little bit later. I actually thought this was going to be a pretty easy item tonight, and it looks like we've got some, to use Commissioner Platzer's language, pretty meaty, but very important and timely item here. So thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Sharon.
I am really happy to see this kind of content come before us. I think that the business owners of Agoura Hills are excited to see something like this. I mean, we had someone in the audience. That's a measure. And so I do agree with I appreciate these things coming before us and you guys in the planning department taking action around these kind of incentives and focusing on our economic development. I do also have some concerns about the smart parking. I feel like I only recognize them in parking structures and paid parking situations, and I don't know that I want to open that gate for Agoura Hills. I don't think I joke with friends that live in the city, like, yeah, come move out to Agoura Hills, you don't have to pay to go to the groceries, to park at the grocery store. Like, I think that we're opening opening up something where we might not want to open at all when it comes to the quality of life that we have here. I don't think people want to look at parking structures in the future and like blocking our views of the mountains or our views of the sunsets. So I think I would like to make a motion to, and I won't make a motion right now, but I would like to kind of see what, I think Travis and Robbie, you guys are going to go and like kind of create something, but I don't think we need the smart parking as an incentive, and I think I would agree with Commissioner Roth in terms of adding, maybe reallocating the incentive for the canopy from the smart parking. So I feel like I just don't think that smart parking is applicable to Agoura Hills. And I don't want it to become a precedent where we're taking a ticket and paying to go to the Ralph's and putting our license plate number into, a system. And that's just not what our town is about. And so, and certainly the parking structures. So I can make all the findings. I also, when it comes to the AVDP and the exemption projects, I think I would like to see a little bit more verbiage where we are kind of addressing the floor area, the increased floor area over time. And I think you guys can probably come up with something and present it to us. But in terms of findings, I can make all the findings. I just want to, before we vote, I would like to see some changes.
Sorry if I
Thank
may.
you. Yes.
So we can certainly go back and work on language. I think we need some clarity from the commission on sort of what to do with the smart parking, if you want to completely eliminate it, or as Commissioner Roth recommended, maybe flipping the tree canopy and the smart parking. So we just need some clear direction on how to alter that language, if that's the commission's wish. For the AVDP, I think we also would benefit from some guidance as to what the commission would want that text to say, or at least kind of conceptually, sort of how you want the addition of square footage, for example, measured. So I think some direction on that front would be helpful.
Yeah, if I may, on the smart parking front, if I may when you characterized it a second ago, in the differences between our community and other communities, and not creating a parking system or incentivizing property owners to then implement technology that then makes it more difficult for our community. I hear you on that. I also don't want to, it's such a broad category that there could be future technologies that I would not want to render, I wouldn't want to disincentivize a property owner in our community from looking at those that may have nothing to do with like, the arms and all that sort of stuff and kind of like restricting the volume of parking. So if you're comfortable with it, I think if we flip the incentive and create more incentive for canopy and less incentive, it deters the worst possibilities I think that you were laying out, but also then future-proofs this in a way where we can encourage maybe a technology that we don't know is out there yet.
I mean, I would hate to open the door and say, let's keep this language in here in case technology evolves and is works out in parking's favor, I think that that's just way too broad, and we don't know what the future holds, and this can always be amended in the future when those technologies are created. I just don't see if you want to reduce it to 1%, 2%, and now we have the language, but it's not a realistic, no one's going to invest, millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars to have a smart technology just for a parking spot, then maybe, but I think we're opening the door for something that if we can always amend this. We can always come back to parking and say, you know what, parking technology or smart parking is the future. It's here. We're doing it. People are happy with it. Westlake's doing it. Calabasas is doing it. Malibu's doing it. We need to adopt these kind of, things as well. And I'm not also saying we're stopping it. We're just not incentivizing it. Because like a landlord can do it as they please with their property, and they could start, paying for parking at Ralph's today, like if they wanted to. So I guess the incentive is encouraging it. Like we're just encouraging it. We're not saying people can't do it. I don't see the incentive behind something that doesn't exist right now.
Yeah, I mean, again, my motivation here is to incentivize more trees.
Yeah. So let's take the 10 and 5% of both smart parking and canopies and combine them.
I mean, I think that's a lot, but it looks like Chair Reinhardt has something to
Yeah.
add here.
I know you guys are shocked. I have something to say. So first off, I want to thank everybody for the thorough consideration of every single element of this proposal, and for staff putting together such an intricate report, and for our audience that was here and public comments. My 2 cents on the deliberation. I do support flipping the incentives and encouraging more tree canopy, and that being the immediate. I do want to clarify, I hear you on opening Pandora's box with the idea of commercial parking, but I will say that this technology and the discretion of staff to make a determination is not directly correlated to commercial parking ventures. Commercial parking ventures, or being able to gatekeep existing parking lots, would be a completely separate issue, because that would be considered a different business venture. It would not be just that the landlord could arbitrarily say, we're going to put in these gates and start charging parking for everyone. So with technology and the advent of much, much larger and more robust monitoring that's happening electronically with sensors and weights and everything. I mean, I have seen commercial parking, or I'm sorry, not commercial parking, caffeine again. I have seen parking monitoring that has not existed in parking structures. And there are a lot of ancillary technologies, and I would not want to limit the ability for the city to be able to make those discretionary decisions. And there would still, again, all of these decisions, there is not one thing when I started reading through all of this that I wanted to just really make sure that I understood, especially when I talked to staff, was that we're not creating a rubber stamp, right? This is not a rubber stamp procedure. This is just designed to help small business owners get through what is a cost prohibitive and arduous process. So my suggestion would be to flip the incentive ratios as Commissioner Roth suggested, and to take a brief recess and let Travis and Robbie come up with some language that we can then vote on. Would everyone be agreeable to that?
I'm agreeable. I do think we should clarify, though, for AVSP before we recess, so that they know what their homework is in recess.
Okay. Do you have some suggested
I
language?
can try to do it as very quickly as possible. I think that if I could capture the sentiment of my fellow commissioners, we understand that the 10% exemption is for modifications that are not they're against the whole sum total of the property, right? So a quick clarification on that versus the individual unit that business might occupy. One. The second one, and I think that's like alterations, repairs, would be something around additions. And so the way I read this, it's alterations and repairs, blah, 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 10% of the existing approved floor area, and do not substantially modify the existing architectural character of the buildings. We could add some clarity if we want. This is should be a quick discussion. Do we want to eliminate the possibility of any addition falling in here, right? So we could add easy language that says substantially modify the existing architectural building or increase the square footage of the building, therefore that requires the ABDP. Does that make sense?
Would footprint be better than existing structure? Or,
Well, it could be up, but that again modifies the architecture. So that's why there's some.
and if it's up, then it's subject to the height restrictions.
Yeah, but it will trigger the AVDP, it'll trigger other things. So that's why I agree with you. I just feel like we should, I see this as like two different problems. One of them is like, we want clarity so that when someone wants to do the tile in their foyer, they don't think like, oh man, I gotta go through this and waste staff time or their time. They actually can clearly see, oh, that's not applicable to what I wanna do. I don't think that reads that easy right now. And the second one is to Vice Chair Sharon's hypothesis, which is someone could stack on 10% addition, 10% addition, 10%. Like, I think if we want to avoid that, we should have some clarifying language that an addition to the structure of the property or something, if that's what we don't want exempted, we should make it very clear that we don't want that exempted.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, so could let me see if I can take a stab at this language. Any additional square footage that is added to the existing structure cannot exceed 10% of the original existing structure before this was passed as of X date.
The way I heard that is that would then trigger the scenario that Vice Chair Sharon laid out, which is then someone could subsequently come back and then add 10% and 10%.
No,
10%.
what I'm saying is that what the 10% cap, so would be based on what the original square footage was at the time that this was
Oh,
passed.
of passage.
Correct. Does that cover our bases? So,
And then
so it's
therefore,
not
anything beyond that would require an ABDP.
anything beyond that. So it would not be piecemeal, 10% here, 10% here.
Yeah.
A 20,000 square foot project is now a 22,500 square foot project, and then now you can add another 10%. It would be, let's say, as of January 1st, 2027,
Yeah.
if your footprint is X,
No, I
then
get it.
it cannot exceed a 10% increase without going past this streamlined process.
If I may, my concern there is that if you take the Wizens, we've been saying the Wizens is 20,000 square feet. It most certainly is much larger than that.
Right.
So we're talking about the potential of, I'm just going to use 100,000 square feet. That would be a massive, as long as they claim, reasonably that it's not modifying the architectural character, they could add a lot of space without going through an ABDP, based off of how I understood what you just said. As long as it's based off of when this was enacted, and does that make sense?
Counselor?
Can I give it a shot on like what the language might look like? So alterations and repair to existing buildings, structures, and other improvements that do not exceed 10% of the existing approved floor area and does not, without increasing floor area. Can we add without increasing floor area? Because like when and just put it at that end, the end of the definition, basically, and do not substantially modify the existing structure and character and building. But if someone's adding a canopy, they're not actually increasing the floor area increasing the floor area. So would that be, or if they're like, they want to change the tiling, they're not actually changing the floor area, or if they want to, put the bar over there instead of over here, they aren't changing the floor area size. But the modification that they're making is also under 10%.
Okay, so basically alterations, repairs, and we'll probably add modifications under 10% of the originally approved square footage of the project would not trigger an ABDP, but any additional square footage to the project would have to go through the ABDP process?
I do want to clarify that if we limit it to gross floor area would prevent like an outdoor canopy with posts. So if you have an outdoor canopy with posts, that would require you to go through an Agoura Village development permit. If that was the language, I just want to make sure that's clear.
Another thing I might suggest, and Robbie, let me know if this isn't workable, but instead of a percentage threshold, we could also just use a numerical threshold of 2,000 square feet or something like that.
I mean,
You
without
run the risk of
having-
a smaller project having a larger percentage, but.
Yeah, I mean, without having stock, like I said, the Wizens, I mean, I would have to surmise that the Canyon Club alone is pretty close to like 50,000 square feet. Again, the Wizens as a whole total of a property at 10%, this would basically give them, as long as they don't, you know, it would exempt based off of, I'm torn on the language because I don't want to give everyone in the Agoura Village a 10%. You know, they can just add 10% to their property as long as they deem that it doesn't substantially change the architectural character. Because that, by the way, it's the character. It's not the architectural mass or structure, right? So that's where I want the clarity of like, I don't want to just give carte blanche, like 10% increase across the board to everyone without further clarifying that that would trigger an AVDP, which has further scrutiny, et cetera. Because that's, I think, what we want to encourage business to improve their property, amend things to their property in a way that helps then continue to flourish, like a canopy and a shade structure and things like that. But we don't want the Wizen Center to be able to add, you know, a 10,000 square foot addition with limited approval. That's my point. I want to avoid that scenario, but also help them get TIFA their shade structure if that's what TIFA wants.
Okay, I just want to, before we go any further then, so I do like the idea because Wizen Center is very large and 20,000, they could add 20,000. I kind of almost thought it would be, I want to add outdoor dining, I want to put a canopy. That's now extending sort of like the outdoor use, and that there would be a maximum of 10%. But if this is really physical construction, where is that going to happen in the first place? Because I can't see another 20,000 square feet being built in the Wizen Center, but I don't want to all of a sudden have it where, oh, I have this right, and now, you know, I want to develop it. And
Well, we are modifying the parking too, so they may be able to do it without modifying the parking.
So do we have any additional suggestions on how to?
I mean, I think as a deliberative process, we need to make a decision as a body. Do we want this to be a limitation on additions at all? Are we comfortable with some sort of percentage? And in certain contexts, like Travis said, for some properties, it's going to be much larger than other properties, and we're just okay with that. You know, or do we want to find another numerical limit to say that, like, oh, any substantial modification or addition to a property over 500 square feet requires an AVDP? I think those are kind of the three ways that we could tackle this.
Could we exempt, sorry, not exempt, could we exclude additional square footage construction that would increase the size of the building? So could we limit it to temporary structures like?
Or
semi-temper, like, is there?
I think that's
is
where
there
Robbie
language
was
that we
saying,
could
like,
put in there where it was, minor alterations versus significant square footage additions? So cosmetic, interior, patio, exterior patio modifications would be exempt from the arduous permitting process, but any increase in square footage, either as an addition that would go on the side of a building or up, would have to go through the normal commercial construction permitting process.
Yeah, concisely, I agree with that. I think that's what we're trying to do, is achieve making it easy for external or like minor modifications to improve quality of life type things.
Yeah.
And try to avoid the slippery slope of saying an addition is exempt and therefore we could just add a bunch of layers to a building, like an onion scenario. So.
Yeah. And I would agree with that, because like what we're trying to do here is make it easier for the small business, not the developer. So I think the small business is looking to always improve, and, you know, like as businesses become more successful, maybe they need to expand. I know, like Blue Table, they expanded into the wine shop next door. Like we want places to be like that. So like I don't know if they had to go through a process to connect those two units, and it was $12,000 just to like get the approval to do the you know, connect the two units. But like something like that, I feel like that should be part of the exempt projects. So I like what you guys, I'm aligned with what you guys, I think we're all on the same page. I just don't know the language. That's why you're here, Travis. But yeah, I think, are you kind of understanding what we're trying to address?
Yeah, I think so. I think it would help to clarify sort of what specific kind of external or quote-unquote minor additions we're talking about, just so that we can kind of tighten up the language there.
Well, I wouldn't say we're doing additions. I think we're doing improvements and if we like alterations and repairs, but we're not adding any structures to the plans. Does that make sense?
But the canopy would be considered a structure
Yeah, I know.
under the legal definition, so.
I
So I
understand.
mean, if the intent is to allow canopies up to a certain size, we can work on language that would do that. I think we just need clarity on kind of what specific structures we'd want to exempt, and then whether or not there are size limits that we want to put on those kinds of structures.
So what would be the difference in getting, let's say, a building permit for a canopy versus adding a 10,000 square foot building to an existing building?
Can't list off all the things that would be different, but a lot.
So
It would be a lot different, yeah.
if we're looking at a camp, so how I'm looking at it is, I really don't want to see Wisdom Center just saying, I'm going to come in and I'm going to add 20,000 square feet. But if it's 20,000 square feet of canopy, that's a very different feeling than 20,000 square foot all of a sudden, where he's putting another building almost between the Do-It Center. I mean, that's kind of now what I'm visualizing this would allow them to do. So I just want to,
One more thing. Could we possibly, because I think the longer that we speak about this, the more kind of threads we pull as far as Pandora's box on how this language needs to be modified. So what I would like to ask is, could we vote on the three out of 4 items and have staff come back with modified language for the 4th item? Because we're getting really into the weeds here, where I don't think that we're providing the additional clarity that's needed, and that there might need to be some additional research or drafting that occurs to make sure that we're not allowing for unmitigated, and I don't mean unmitigated, I know that you have good judgment, Robbie, but future-proofing against unmitigated expansion of existing developments with regards to egregious amounts of square footage.
Yeah, and if I may also, what I'm hearing from the commission is that you're on board with allowing essentially accessory additions to existing tenant spaces, but not new construction of primary structures. So what we could say is something along the lines of minor alterations to existing buildings or exempt projects include accessory additions to existing tenant spaces that do not exceed a certain square footage. I think that might capture the intent.
I like that a lot. I also was thinking, the second graph of section E, we actually strike out involving new construction. Would it actually make more sense to just revert that back to how it was so that it only addresses new construction versus everyone requiring an AVDP or not? Because I did like that. So like, just, that's a question to you, Travis.
I think we have to think through the language because I think you could argue addition of an accessory structure still is construction. So the reason that change was made was because we wanted to add that exempt project section. So just for consistency, we need to not say that it's applicable to all new construction, just construction that's subject to the AVDP requirements that includes that carve out, if that makes sense.
But we could do what Vice Chair Sharon proposed, and then just in the exempt projects, add as a project precisely what you just said.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Essentially, we could, all projects involving new construction require an AVDP with the exception of exempt projects, which is the second half of what we're deliberating. And then in the exempt projects, we could basically keep it as is, because all projects that have new construction would be required to get the AVDP. Yet we could add an exemption for accessory structures, including such examples like shade structures, things like that, could be exempt, as long as they fall within the 10% threshold.
Yeah, I mean, so it would read all projects involving new construction except exempt projects under this section. Is that what you're envisioning?
No, I would read it as all projects require an AVDP, comma, with the exception of exempt projects, comma, must follow a three-step process. And then the exempt projects falls later, where we say exempt projects are the alterations and repairs, shade structures, things like that are all exempt and don't have to go through an AVDP process.
So I think the way the analysis would work right now, it says all projects requiring an AVDP, right? And we have an exempt project section. So whatever's covered in the exempt projects, by definition, does not require an AVDP. So I think we can probably leave the language the same, but I mean, if we want to add additional language, we can, but.
And if I could also suggest, I think I understand the intent behind the language, and what we could do is take a 5-minute recess, be able to put some suggested language on the screen, and then we can talk through the suggested language, and if we want to make any changes at that point, then we can, at least we'll have something to look at so that we can kind of have a better deliberation about it.
Sorry, and just so that we're capturing everything. So I think we're hearing there's consensus around flipping the percentage threshold of smart parking systems and parking lot beautification. Is that the consensus of the commission?
I'm okay with that. I would just like to know on the ratio for, so smart parking would now be 5%, is that correct? In the scenarios that you guys had, how many like additional parking spots would that, like in the canopy one, you said you get 15 more parking spots. So I'm assuming now it's 10, so it would be 30 new parking spots. But what's the situation with, what was the example for 10% in smart parking? So now it's halved that.
Yeah, I believe the example was 10,000 square feet equated to think it was 15 parking spaces
Right, for the canopy.
for the canopies.
But-
So that it would essentially be the same thing for now the smart parking systems if we reduce that to 5%. So it
Okay,
would be the
okay.
same
So it'd be
scenario.
15 now,
Yeah.
essentially? Okay, okay.
Can we take a 5-minute recess? Okay.
Oh, Can I
So,
just, sorry, make it quick. When I read this, I didn't see all this. I saw it as existing structure, you modify architecture review, and it was an improvement. It wasn't adding 2,000 square feet. I read it as the language states. So I think we're getting into muddy waters. That's just my comment.
But are you okay with modifying to clarify if that's what, I mean, do you have an objection to that?
I have an objection to that, but as far as flipping with the trees and the smart parking, I'm okay with that.
So, okay, so do we have to vote on whether or not we're modifying anything, or?
So I don't think a vote is necessary. I think we have consensus around the changes that are being proposed. We can work on language, bring that back. And then I think at that point, if the commission's okay with the changes, then we take the vote to approve the new language. But I think for now, we have direction.
Okay,
But-
let's
but
take a
before-
5-minute.
Sorry.
Sorry, sorry, Travis, I
Sorry,
didn't mean to cut you off.
Before we recess, just want to make sure that there are no other language changes that you'd want us to work on. So right now, we're working on the smart parking system language, the parking lot beautification, the AVDP sections that we're talking about. Is there anything else?
No. Okay, all right. Let's take a 5-minute, 10-minute recess. Okay, so can we come back at 9:07? 9:07, okay. 9:07, thank you. We are reconvening after a brief recess to modify language in the proposal. Okay, I will, now that we are reconvened at 9:14, I will defer to Travis to go through the proposed language changes.
So the proposed language sorry, let me pull it up. The proposed language to Chapter 7, Section E of the Agoura Village specific plan is as proposed on the screen, so I'll just read it. Exempt projects. The following projects shall not require an Agoura Village development permit. Alterations and repairs to existing buildings, structures, or other improvements that do not substantially modify the existing architectural character of the buildings and structures on the property and do not increase the existing floor area. Additions of unenclosed patios or shade structures to existing tenant spaces that do not exceed 500 square feet or substantially modify the existing architectural character of the building, provided that no other exempt additions for the tenant space have been previously constructed. Exempt projects shall be reviewed and approved administratively if the project complies with the vision and regulations provided by the plan, including the established land uses and standards that address each site, as well as those that are applicable area-wide.
I think this is very good. At the additions, on the second bullet point, provided that no other exempt additions for the tenant space have been previously constructed, I still think that's too limiting. I think it certainly achieves what we want to achieve in terms of limiting additional construction, but I do think there's so many different types. Like the Wizen Center is just like a prime example of like two-faced, I think of like the like Basta has got the back. Maybe they want to go to the front, but if they've already gotten something on the back, can they not then go do something in the front? So can we add some language here that provided that no other exempt additions for the tenant space have been previously constructed unless otherwise authorized by the community development director, so that we give explicit authority in that kind of circumstance to the community development director?
My issue with that would be, I think we need standards by which the community development director could make their decision. I think you don't want to give them a blank check, right?
Yeah, I just read this though. Then this gives someone a one-time pass, and then any future development, which is like I think we're anchored on the Wizens, but I think the Wizens is like the prime example of like there are certain businesses in there that have footprints on both sides of the business, and this is would limit them to only doing something on one side.
Another option might be that we could provide a cumulative number over all of the exempt additions. So it would be the 500 square feet per addition, but then we also designate so long as it cumulatively doesn't exceed a larger number, for example.
Could it be that it's 500 square feet per tenant space, so that like Canyon Club gets 500 feet, Basta gets 500 feet,
Yes, so as currently drafted, it would be 500 square feet per tenant space. And then with that provided language at the end, right, that's specific for the tenant space, that specific tenant space. So another tenant could then apply for a 500 square foot addition.
Right, but I think that I actually really like that idea but with removing the the does not exceed exempt addition, basically like the previous structure. So like if Basta, for example, wanted to put a patio in the back that was 250 square feet, and they said, you know what, this was great, let's expand it another 250 square feet, they could do that up to the certain amount of 500 square feet, versus they've done already one construction and they didn't maximize their square footage, so they have no opportunity to revise that. Like they can't do anything else, essentially.
Well, they could. They would just have to pull a permit.
the expensive way.
Yes.
Yes, but that's what we're trying to avoid for companies. You know,
Yeah.
Boston's a perfect example of the people we're trying to support. Were you going to say something, Robbie?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so what you're suggesting is basically that last portion of the sentence could be altered to say, provided that all other exempt additions for the tenant space that have been previously conducted do not cumulatively exceed 500 square feet.
Yeah, I like that because that is, so if Wizen is 5,000 or, 100,000 square feet, each unit, let's say there's 40 units, it's not gonna, I don't think is gonna exceed, coming anywhere close to 10%, but you're still giving tenants ability to kind of like have some like room to grow.
Yeah.
Whether they need temporary spacing, like if, Tifa wants to put a shade and then they're like, you know what, let's enclose this during the winter. Like that might make more sense to them or something. So they have flexibility to operate with a little bit more freedom. I like that idea.
I agree. I like this 500 one time without having a clear ability to either stack it in certain circumstances or just increase the bottom threshold instead of 500, something greater. Because 500 square feet that's not that large. That gets eaten up very quickly.
I mean, when I think of it conceptually, it's like bigger than a garage, a 2-car garage. It's like a 3-car garage, or it's like right under, it's between 2 and 3-car garage. So like, I don't know that Basta has more than 500 square feet behind them and in front of them, for example. I don't think Canyon Club has any space except for the walkway and the loading dock. So like, I don't know that it might be prohibitive, but I don't think there's more than 500 square feet each tenant can, like Basta can't go into the art gallery next door. They can only go back and forth.
So are we okay with a cumulative 500 square feet? Is the commission okay with that?
I am. Anybody have like some insights that maybe I have a blind spot to? I'm open to it.
I mean, we keep going back to Wizen Center. I'm not sure how many tenants there are, but if there's 20 tenants, we're limiting it to 500, that's 10,000 square feet. That's definitely below the 20,000 that was, so I'm fine.
And we're also, in this language, and correct me, Travis, if I'm incorrect, but this is really putting it's putting the power to the tenants, not the landlords. Like, the landlord can't go out and develop 500 extra square feet per unit, can they?
Yeah, they would be able to, based off of this language.
Okay, and is that, is that possible without changing the character of the building and having to pull an actual permit?
So under the existing language, it's exceed 500 square feet or substantially modify the existing architectural character of the building. So even if it were under the 500 square foot threshold, but it did modify the existing architectural character, it would not qualify for this exemption.
So if they wanted to put like, a giant chicken head on top of the building, it would significantly alter the architectural character of the building and not meet with the look and feel of the general plan for the Agoura Village, and therefore it would not qualify for this exemption.
That's even if it were smaller than 500
Right,
square
even if
feet.
the chicken head were smaller
That's
than
right.
500 square feet, just to give an absurd example. So I am okay with this modification.
So, let me ask you, if every unit got 500 additional square feet, and they cumulatively put that together and said, we want another 10,000 square foot project somewhere on the property, we're now ignoring the tenants, and now we're talking to the landlord who's, we're now if the landlord uses all of this modification, exemption, to build out their property, and there's nothing left for the tenants, and now the tenants still have to go through the permit process, we haven't done anything.
That's not how I don't read that. This is an addition of unenclosed patios and shade structures to existing tenant spaces. So the scenario that you just laid out would require an ADVP probably anyway.
Okay, all right. All right, thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, go
So if we wanted to go with the 500 square foot cumulative, I think we would need to make some additional textual changes.
yeah.
We can kind of go through if there are any other issues, and then I think we can quickly make those changes, but I'd want to have it up on the board just so everyone can see it before we move forward with a vote.
So what would we need to do? Do we need to take another recess for you to make the changes?
I would request that we do.
Okay, can we make it 5 minutes? Okay. All right, let's take a 5-minute recess. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, so returning at 9:30.
Thank you. 9:30. And I will defer to Travis for the modified statement.
Okay, so we have amended that exempt projects language in Chapter 7, Section E of the Agoura Village Specific Plan. Katrina's going to bring that up. Okay. So I will read it again. So the proposed language changes, again, exempt projects. The following projects shall require an Agoura Village development permit. Alterations and repairs to existing buildings, structures, or other improvements that do not substantially modify the existing architectural character of the buildings and structures on the property and do not increase the existing floor area. Additions of unenclosed patios or shade structures to an existing tenant space that do not substantially modify the existing architectural character of the building, and, provided that all exempt additions for the tenant space do not cumulatively exceed 500 square feet. Exempt projects shall be reviewed and approved administratively if the project complies with the vision and regulations provided by the plan, including the established land uses and standards that address each site, as well as those that are applicable area-wide.
This looks good to me. I have one last clarifying question. In the scenario of the addition, the cumulatively exceeding 500 square feet, if I remove a structure and I add a new structure, the cumulative then is, like the math there is that is removed, the original structure, so you get the entire allotment back. Is that correct? Is that how you would read this, Travis?
Yes, that's how I would read it.
Okay. With that, I'm supportive of this proposed language change.
Same.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So, all right, so we have consensus on the modifications.
And-
So, do we need to do a vote on the modifications?
Oh, so we also have
Oh,
the change to the actual zoning ordinance.
okay. Sorry, I'm excited.
So this would be, sorry. Katrina, do you know what section this is? I have to find it. Yeah.
Section 15 of the zoning ordinance amendment.
So this is section 15. This would be the amendment to section 9654.2 of the municipal code. So this is 9654.2. Sorry, finding the right section here. E5 for, or can we do the smart parking first? E5 for smart parking systems. So it would be amended to read, a property owner or tenant who implements a smart parking system which utilizes sensors, cameras, or real-time data to assist drivers in locating parking and reducing congestion may request a reduction in required parking. No more than 5% of the cumulative parking required for the shopping center may be reduced through the implementation of smart parking systems. All right, and we would also be making an amendment to section 6, which says parking lot beautification projects within existing shopping centers or commercial properties that increase parking lot tree canopy coverage by at least 10% of the floor area of the parking lot shall be eligible for a 10% cumulative parking reduction.
Commissioner Roth, I'm supportive of both of those modifications.
I am too.
I am too.
I am too. I also am supportive of the modifications. So with that, do we need to take a vote on the modifications, or can we take a vote on the total findings?
So I can read the staff recommendation, including, and it'll note that this language has been amended.
Okay.
And then if people want to move that staff recommendation and second it, then we can proceed from there.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay. All right, so I will read the staff recommendation. Adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council, 1, approve a zoning ordinance amendment to Article 9 zoning of the Agoura Hills Municipal Code, including Commercial Use Table 1, Special Conditions 9312.3, C, Off-Street Parking Regulations, Section 9654 et sec, D, Part 13, Standards for Specific Uses of Chapter 3, Commercial Districts, to renumber the alcoholic beverage sales section and add new ministerial approval standards for certain alcoholic beverage establishments with a Type 41 or 47 ABC license, create new experiential retail standards, and E, other textual changes for consistency. 2, approve a specific plan amendment to the Agoura Specific Plan, AVSP, to establish a streamlined review and administrative process for eligible project types and align on-sale beverage establishment use provisions with the municipal code as amended. Sorry, I also want to clarify that the zoning ordinance amendment is also as amended. And 3, make a determination of exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA.
This is Commissioner Roth, so moved.
Well, I have to call for a motion. So, thank you, Travis. I will now call for a motion in a second.
So moved by Commissioner Roth.
Seconded, Commissioner Stein.
Thank you. I will now defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Platzer?
Aye.
Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Stein?
Aye.
Vice Chair Sharon?
Aye.
Chair Reinhardt?
Aye.
Chair Reinhardt, do you have approval? 5-0.
Congratulations, everyone. We did it. Are there any additional comments from staff? Are there any additional comments from the Planning Commission? Hearing none, thank you, everyone, for your hard work tonight. We did it, and I commend everyone on their work and professionalism, and I hope everyone has a great evening. So I will announce that I will call for adjournment and not use the gavel yet. The next regular Planning Commission meeting is scheduled for 6:00 p.m. on Thursday, August 20th, 2026, in the council chambers of the Civic Center located at 30001 Ladyface Court, Agoura Hills, California. This meeting is now adjourned.